Take a chill pill, man. Take a chill pill, man.
That's correct.
Take a chill pill, man.
Ben, stop talking to me about basketball trades.
Oh!
Hey, everybody, how's it going?
That was low. You were the one who mentioned it.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, come on. That's pretty slick.
How's it going, everybody? We got people on the live stream chat waiting here. So, Ben, let's get to it, all right? Quit screwing around.
All right.
Your Ben Joravsky show for Thursday, February 6th is just moments away. But before we get into this, we need to thank the following unions for jumping on board and sponsoring this program. Unions like the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126 and District 8. The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9 are sponsors. The International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150 are sponsors. In fact, we got a gentleman from the IUOE stopping in today. It's Ed Maher. And, of course, today's Ben Joravsky show is brought to you by our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. It's a snowy day, but don't worry. You're still going to get a song of the day. Ben Joravsky.
Hold on.
We got time. It's fine. Go ahead.
I heard this one last night, D. I heard it as I was driving around town. I love this. I haven't heard it in years. Here we go. Riders on the stone. Into this world we're born to into this world we're you know that song?
Yeah, it's the Doors.
My man.
The Ben Joravsky show starts now. It is Thursday, February 6th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. Today on the program, we're talking all things what the hell happened in Iowa again, and progressive politics with Miles Kampf-Lassin of In These Times magazine. Union man Ed Maher is back, and we welcome record store owner Paul Ruffino. And now your host, record store browser, Chicago Reader columnist Ben Joravsky.
Hello, everybody. Ben Joravsky here. We're calling this I Love Nancy Pelosi Thursday. And here's why. Confession time, D. Oh, I'm going to get in a lot of trouble for this one. I love Nancy Pelosi.
None of us are surprised.
I've been saying this from time to time over the last several months, and every time I say it, man, do I get hit hard by my lefty friends who I love dearly as well. All right, now they always point out there's a lot of issues with Nancy Pelosi and her role as the leader of the centrist wing of the Democratic Party and her role as the leader of the House of Representatives. They point out that she was the author or the sponsor or on some of the most regressive legislation, banking legislation. Yeah, I cannot argue with that down through the years. She's not really a Bernie Sanders type progressive who's going to lead the fight for more social equity. Yes, I can't argue with that point. And let's see, what else is there? Oh, yeah, there's that bizarre, twisted rule by the DACCC that they will not hire operatives who work for candidates who run against the incumbent Dems. Yeah, that's just misguided on top of everything else because you're cutting yourself off from a lot of talent. So, yeah, okay, there's a lot to criticize about her. That said, I love Nancy Pelosi. All right, folks, I kind of missed this the other day, State of the Union thing. I always a little behind because, I was still obsessed with Iowa Gate, which I cannot stop talking about. Miles Kampf-Lassin will be in the studio later today, D. We are ready to take it apart. Bernie won Iowa. Somehow or other, he lost Iowa, but Bernie won Iowa. Hey, we're ready to rip that one. But anyway, so I wasn't really paying attention when she ripped up the speech. What a gangster move, D. Come on, ripped up the speech.
Gangster move.
So when I say that to people, my friends of the leftist persuasion, what do they say to me? I'm just going to quote a very dear friend of mine who will remain unnamed, who is a huge Bernie Sanders supporter, D. I'm going to quote to this person. When I said to this person today, let's call him Joey Bob. When I told
Hey, Joey Bob. Thanks for listening.
When I told Joey Bob, man, I love Nancy Pelosi for ripping up that speech. You know what Joey Bob said to me?
What did Joey Bob say?
Oh, that's just an act. Man, she can't win. It was a total act of defiance, right? Trump was standing there. I say this to Joey Bob. I say this to all my friends of the lefty persuasion. When was the last time you stood right up to Donald Trump and ripped up a speech in front of him? That takes some guts, D. Anyway, so I appreciate that because, listen, I acknowledge that there's a lot of things I don't see eye to eye with when it comes to policy with Nancy Pelosi. But this is a moment. It's an existential crisis. We have an all-powerful egomaniac in charge of the government, Donald John Trump. I will now remind you folks, controls the White House. He controls the Supreme Court. They're all his lackeys that he's appointed there. He now has a voting majority there. He controls the Senate. That was clear the other day when they acquitted him, even though the evidence was overwhelming. And of course, he controls the Republican Party, and he controls Fox News, the most powerful news outlet in the country. So he has his own source of counter news. Could you imagine if the Republican Party had done to Donald Trump what the Democratic Party did to Bernie Sanders, effectively announce that the other guy was the winner of the election? Could you imagine what Fox would have done if that were the case? They'd been screaming and yelling and calling for heads. But Democrats don't have anything remotely resembling Fox News, like an in-house media monster, really. So Trump controls that. So he's a very powerful guy. Nancy Pelosi stood up to him, ripped that speech, and she let him know that as far as she's concerned, the House of Representatives is still an independent body, and as far as she's concerned, the resistance continues. That's why I like Nancy Pelosi. We got a great show today, everybody. Miles Kampf-Lassin will be in the studio, as I said before, in these times reporter, big-time Bernie Sanders supporter. And we've already had a mini show, D, on the phone about 10:30 today, going on and on about the New York Times and its coverage of Iowa and allowing Pete Buttigieg to declare himself a victor in Iowa. What the heck happened in Iowa? Cannot wait to have a little more discussion with Miles Kampf-Lassin on that one. Ed Maher will be here. Union man Ed Maher will be here talking about some of the recent Trump appointees to the Department of Labor. And very bad for unions. Trump is not friendly to the unions at all. Paul Ruffino will be here. The record man, Paul Ruffino, talking about some of the great classic political albums that he is. He's a collector, a master collector of these things. So a lot of political discussion ahead of us. But before we do any of that, we got the man from Malton, the man they call Dr. Doobie, with the news.
Hey, how's it going? Local news. Let's talk about it. Our Illinois governor, J.B. Pritzker, was in Mapleton, Illinois today, Ben Joravsky. He toured, or maybe is touring. It's tough to tell when your show's on at 1 in the afternoon. He is touring the IUOE 659 Apprenticeship and Training Center. Mapleton, Illinois is a small town, roughly 3 hours south of Chicago, near Peoria. Ben Joravsky for 10 trivia points.
I feel I'm going to really blow this trivia question.
According to a 2017 census, what is the population of Mapleton, Illinois?
Oh.
Remember, it's a small town.
Small town, 1,310.
No, sir. 273 is the population of Mapleton.
I was thinking more of the metro region. That's what I was thinking of.
273 people in Mapleton. Small town there.
But the suburbs of Mapleton.
And for those wondering where to go to maybe have a good time in Mapleton, the Tin Lizard Bar in East Peoria. Karaoke every Thursday and live entertainment every Friday and Saturday.
Have you ever been there?
Never.
Oh, okay. Let's go there sometime.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Take a field trip.
All right, enough about Mapleton. But Mr. Pritzker, you know how I feel. I love that you're going downstate more and more. I like you, and I want these downstaters to like you too. So remember, if you're ever in an awkward moment talking with a downstater who may disagree with you or doesn't support you, remind them of who is coming to town this summer performing songs. Toby Keith and Puddle of Mud. You got that in your back pocket with these downstaters. I tell you, they love
Puddle of Mud big and downstate?
Well, I mean, at one point they were.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, time for actual news. And man, 20th Ward Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor is cool. She aired out her grievances with our Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot on Wednesday. The following comes from the Chicago Sun-Times and the one and only Fran the Woman Spielman. The headline reads, Lightfoot accused of smoke and mirrors plan for Woodlawn that doesn't protect anybody from Obama Center displacement. Rookie Alderman Jeanette Taylor is angered by Lightfoot's decision to draft watered-down protections for Woodlawn instead of negotiating changes to the community benefits ordinance backed by Taylor and Alderman Leslie Hairston. Ben, before we go any further, provide us here with a little context. What's the dilly with the dally in all this?
Well, all right, I'll try to be concise as I can. President Obama and Michelle Obama decided it was a good idea to put the Obama Center in the middle of Jackson Park, which is on the south side, just south of the Museum of Science and Industry. That plan was approved during the days of your favorite mayor, Mayor Rahm Emanuel.
How'd you know?
And just kidding.
You saw my tattoo.
Yeah, Mayor Pete and Mayor Rahm. Anyway.
Take a chill pill, man.
Sorry, Rahm. And I opposed it, okay? Obviously, I don't have a tremendous amount of sway in the Rahm Emanuel administration. I felt that the center shouldn't go in a park, that we should leave parks for what they are, open space, and we shouldn't clutter our parks with buildings. And furthermore, I felt that there were plenty of vacant land that could really use a shot in the arm throughout the south side where the Obama Center could go. But you know what? They didn't listen to me. Okay? They moved on. They approved Jackson Park. Meanwhile, there's the issue of the collateral impact of the center, and most significantly, the fact that it'll probably connect to rising real estate prices that already exist to cause even more gentrification in the area. So Jeanette Taylor, who was just elected alderman April in a runoff against Nicole Johnson, Jeanette Taylor is representing the local residents and activists in that area who believe there should be some very stringent protections in a benefits agreement with the neighborhood to protect them from rising rents and rising real estate price. And guess what? City of Chicago really doesn't want that. I mean, that's just a fight that's going on throughout the city of Chicago, not just in Woodlawn, not just with the Obama Center, but also on the north side, in Wicker Park and Bucktown, the 606 Trail. This is just a big-time fight throughout the city. By and large, the people who run this city view gentrification as a bonus because it's a sign of investment in the city. It's a sign that wealthier people are coming to the city, and they do not regard deals, agreements, like the one that Jeanette Taylor is supporting that would limit the amount of money a landlord could seek in rent as good for the city. So there's just going to be a battle there, D. If Jeanette Taylor holds the line, she's going to come face to face with the powers that be in the city of Chicago.
All right, so we're all caught up here. So let's continue with the Fran Spielman article. Alderwoman Taylor is livid about Lightfoot's decision to draft her own watered-down protections for Woodlawn instead of coming to the table and negotiating changes to the community benefits ordinance introduced last summer by Taylor and Alderman Leslie Hairston. By the way, Ben, what ward, Leslie Hairston?
Come on, D. 5th Ward.
Who are you? Jeanette Taylor gave a City Hall press conference alongside worried Woodlawn residents on Wednesday. And in Jeanette Taylor fashion, her comments were honest and powerful. We have the quotes only, no audio. I know, so I won't be doing this any justice here. But we're going to read the quotes from Jeanette Taylor here. Here's the first set of quotes. Quote, People are being displaced while we play games. It's just smoke and mirrors. You wasted my time and my community's time with what Taylor called, quote, BS. She thinks she does not have to listen to me and she does not have to work with me, so I'm going to fight her and everybody else on making sure this doesn't pass.
The she in that sentence is Mayor Lori Lightfoot, correct?
This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine.
That's correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that the she in that sentence is Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Hey, I just got finished talking about how much guts Nancy Pelosi has to defy the all-powerful president of the United States who controls pretty much everything except for the House of Representatives. How about Jeanette Taylor? Takes a lot of guts to stand up to an all-powerful mayor, particularly one who does not take well to criticism, does not really like it when people speak out against her. I could guarantee you that Jeanette Taylor is not number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 on Lori Lightfoot's list of favorite people. In fact, she's probably in the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of people that Lori Lightfoot least likes at the moment. All right, so I got to give Jeanette Taylor. Well, everybody knows I'm a big Jeanette Taylor fan. She's been on the show many times. I like her because she speaks her mind. She speaks from her heart. She's very passionate, and she's been there. She's on the front lines of so many fights in that neck of the woods. You know, I tell Jeanette I did not take a stand in her election against Nicole Johnson because Nicole Johnson went to high school with my daughter, and I felt divided in that one, you know, but I love Jeanette Taylor. She went on a hunger strike to defy the powers that be, to force the city to build, to reopen Diet High School, make it a neighborhood school. She's always been very outspoken. She speaks her mind, unafraid. We need more people in the city council like Jeanette Taylor.
All right, Jeanette Taylor continues here. This was during her City Hall press conference, speaking to the mayor in public here. Quote, you take advantage of the new alderman who doesn't really know the process and you introduce what you want to introduce. I was never told that they were going to rewrite their own housing ordinance. I would never have agreed. Taylor said that, quote, the only thing we agree on is the demand that residents have a right of first refusal to purchase the buildings they live in before they are sold to private developers. What happens to the people who are retired who own their homes that are going to be property taxed out? What happens to the voucher holders? Their voucher is for $1,500. What happens when this landlord comes back and says your rent is going to be $2,000? Do you think these families can afford an additional $500? I don't think so. This does not protect anybody. Look at the color of the people they're supposed to be protecting. If this was anywhere else, there would not be a conversation.
Okay, so now she introduces the racial angle, and I believe there was a follow-up to this?
Yeah, reminded that Lightfoot is African-American, Jeanette Taylor said, quote, just because you black don't mean you black. Where does she live? Where did she grow up?
All right, I am going to definitely stay out of that back and forth. I have no place in the middle of that one for all the obvious reasons, but I'll say this. When it comes to the issue, the heart of this dispute is an ironclad protection for people who live in the Woodlawn area, people who live in close to the Obama Center. And the reality is prices are already rising in that area in anticipation of the Obama Center. Prices will continue to rise. I believe we're going to see the southern gentrification movement that's coming out of the loop and going through Bronzeville, heading into Hyde Park. It's been happening for many years. It's part of a larger plan in the city. The city makes it clear that they think it's in the best interest of Chicago to have gentrification, to have wealthier people. And if you have wealthier people move to a neighborhood, they pay more for the houses, and the property taxes rise as a result of rising assessments on the value. And guess what, folks? It's just inevitable. People are going to be priced out. Jeanette Taylor is asking that the city do something it's never done before, and that is protect working class people, lower middle class people, and poor people from being moved as a result of gentrification. I've now lived through gentrification, that's occurred on the north side in Lincoln Park, in Lakeview, in North Center, in Wicker Park, Bucktown, Humboldt Park. I've seen it happen in my lifetime. And never once has the city of Chicago stepped in any way to protect the interests of most of the people who moved out. It's widely considered to be healthy and good for the city if poor people get moved out of a neighborhood and wealthier people get moved in. That's just a fact, D. That's just how we look at it here in the city of Chicago. Jeanette Taylor is fighting a very tough fight. And not only that, it's the Obama Center, as in Obama, okay? Obama is still very popular in the city of Chicago. If you recall, in 2015, all it took was a commercial from Barack Obama endorsing Mayor Rahm, and Mayor Rahm was reelected. Well, and he put that sweater on. He put the sweater. He's wearing the sweater, okay? Come on, Ben. Stop being so hard on him.
The Rob sweater thing cracks me up.
No, he put the sweater on. I know. This is how little appreciation he had for your intelligence, people. They got together. They go, boss, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put a sweater on you. You're going to say, I own this. And everybody's going to go, we forgive you. And it worked. Oh, come on, Ben. He's wearing a sweater. Oh, well, yeah, he is wearing a sweater.
Lori Lightfoot, don't start wearing sweaters.
Oh, my God, my fellow Chicagoans. Their vote counts the same as mine, D. That's the fact, okay? Anyway, Jeanette Taylor, more power to you. I really appreciate your gutsiness. You're like Nancy Pelosi, all right? I'm going to link Nancy Pelosi and Jeanette Taylor. Got a lot of guts. And I like how you stand up to the powers that be. It's going to be a tough fight, Jeanette Taylor.
He loves Nancy Pelosi.
Love Nancy Pelosi, D.
Jeanette Taylor, we got your back here on the Ben Joravsky Show, all right? Jeanette Taylor wants to go back to the bargaining table, starting with the CBA ordinance, and find a way to meet in the middle. Ended out here with some quotes with Jeanette Taylor. Quote, I ain't saying all or nothing. I ain't foolish enough to think that, she said. But while they're wasting time, my community is being gentrified, and people are being put out. These reporters don't know how to handle such honesty.
Yeah.
And all their oh, my. Well, that was candid.
Or they go, we like Lori Lightfoot. No, come on. Should I do my Mike Flannery invitation? Yeah.
Go for it.
Lori Lightfoot got 75% of the vote. Come on, Flannery. Come back to this studio.
Oh, Ben, we got a birthday to celebrate. Yeah, that's right. One of our former guests on the Ben Joravsky Show has a birthday today.
Ooh.
Oh, I'm going to look it up here. I got to pull it up. Hang tight here. You remember Emmanuel Chris Welch?
Yeah.
Today's his birthday.
Hey,
Chairman
Chris
of the Illinois
Welch.
House Executive Committee.
State representative from the western suburbs. I believe the pride and joy, I want to say Proviso West. Maybe not. I can't remember. Who can remember all these things? All right.
Well, I'm sure.
He went to Northwestern and he played baseball. Did you know that?
Oh, my God. Things for some reason.
Well, because he said it in the studio, because I was listening to him when he said it.
Happy birthday, Chris Welch. And, hope your high school is awesome. Okay, so let's go to the live stream chat here. A lot of people weighing in. Let's see here. Kyle weighed in. He says, D, talking to me, I'm D. D, if you rip up a piece of paper in front of Ben, will he sing your praises? He loves Nancy Pelosi.
I do love Nancy Pelosi. I do. But I'm not as all-powerful in my little universe as Donald John Trump is in his. It's the other way around. Who asked the question?
Oh, that's Kyle.
Yeah, Kyle. If I dared to rip up a piece of paper in front of Dr. Doobie, would you sing my praises? Because that's who runs the show, folks. Don't kid yourself.
As long as it's not a rolling paper. Don't go ripping up rolling papers around Dr. Doobie.
Can I talk about our little exchanges when we're walking home?
Yeah,
You're
sure.
smoking. Or am I supposed to keep that off the record?
Whatever.
I'll leave it alone. Kyle, sometimes I'll give you the inside scoop on the rolling paper.
All right, let's see here. We got Kyle. Kyle weighed in here. The real question for Ben about Mapleton, we were talking about Mapleton, Illinois earlier. The real question for Ben about Mapleton is what is the mascot of the high school in Mapleton, and which politicians graduated from there?
You know what? I do not know. In fact, I have a confession. Who said this?
Kyle again?
Kyle, I got a confession to make. Until Dennis said Mapleton, I didn't know it existed. Oh, God, should I have admitted that, D?
We lost all our Mapleton listeners.
They're the Mapleton Tigers, and the most famous alumni is Kyle, all right? Actually, I do not know that.
We know. All right, let's see here. Brianna weighed in. Dennis cracking me up with his Jeanette Taylor reads. Yeah, I'm a white guy. All right, let's see.
Brianna, I was thinking the same things when the doctor was reading. He made a point to say, we don't have the audio, so I'll do my best. We're going to bring Jeanette Taylor back to the studio, and you get to hear Jeanette in her own voice.
Let's see here. Oh, it says here, Brianna let us know Trump is advertising on Ben's show. There was a, when people watch on the live stream, there was a Trump ad before they go to us.
I'm telling you, man, all powerful. He's like, yeah, same thing happened the other day when I was looking for an article about impeachment or something. There was Trump, man. I'm telling you. Hey, that's why I saw this is going to get my lefty friends mad. Like I always say, centrist. I don't know why you're wasting your time with Biden. I don't know why you're wasting time with Buttigieg. Go with Bloomberg. He can match Trump dollar for dollar and all that commercial stuff.
Kyle's making fun of Ben some more for his love for Nancy Pelosi. Kyle says, this is great to hear from Ben about Pelosi. I now just want him to look at a watching magic show and seeing his eyes glow with awe and entertainment. How'd they do that?
You guys are hard on Nancy Pelosi.
And Ben.
All right, tell you what. Oh, that's tough. All right. I want any one of you out there talking Nancy Pelosi, go up to Donald Trump and rip up
Well, they don't have the
speech.
opportunity
I
you
see.
know?
Okay, all right.
Come on.
All right.
All right, so I think that's it. Feel free to weigh in on the live stream chat. We'll read your comments as today's program rolls along. Oh, Steven. Steven's the man. I guess he's a Mapleton know-it-all here. There is no high school in Mapleton. Well, there is 273 people, so.
Is that the same Steven who chastised me yesterday?
Yeah.
Steven,
He's doing good about that, by the way. He hasn't said Bernie, bro.
You said it just now.
Come on. But he hasn't said it in over 24 hours. It's really good.
I took your criticism to heart. Unlike some of the other things about Nancy Pelosi, I took it to heart. You were absolutely right, and I was telling people yesterday, stop using it. Stop using the phrase. So yeah, I learned from Steven. As far as those Nancy haters, come on, show some love for NP, Nancy Pelosi.
Oh, and, Ben, we didn't really talk much about it yesterday. TIF reform.
Oh, my God, this is going to be the subject of an article I read. I take the deep dive into this one. All right. We have a lot of out-of-town listeners. They don't even know what the TIF is. The TIF program is an economic development program in the city of Chicago. It's basically a surcharge on the property tax you pay, and the money goes into bank funds absolutely controlled by the mayor. It's one of the most, probably the biggest scam going in the city of Chicago. But the reason why mayors love it is because it gives them control of tens of millions, hundreds of millions of property tax dollars every year that they pretty much have complete control, dictatorial control over how it's spent. So no mayor is going to want to give it up. On the other hand, it's such a wretched scam that they have to have the pretense that they're reforming it. So every year there's these TIF reforms, and guess what, D? It never gets reformed. So, yeah, that's kind of my sense of TIFs.
Interesting. You felt that way yesterday and still feel the same way today. Nothing's changed, huh?
Nothing has changed in my attitude toward TIFs since I really started exploring the program in the late 90s.
Oh, Ben, I know what we needed to do. Mm-hmm. You always bring this up, and you're terrible at
remembering.
Yeah, you're very terrible
I got some
at
issues.
Remembering. You wanted to compare headlines, right?
Oh, well, I was going to do that later. Oh my goodness. Okay, can we do that right now?
Well, yep. Set it up now. So we usually set up two headlines: Chicago Tribune, Chicago Sun-Times.
Yes. What's there to set up anymore? That was brilliant.
Well, there you go. We see which paper did the best.
So, so now Dennis will be the judge, okay?
Live stream chat can weigh in as well.
All right, so first let's go with the Tribune. Now, just so you know, the Sun-Times is a tabloid, so they have tabloid-style headlines.
Very punny.
Yeah, punny, funny, punchy, right? Okay. So yesterday, as we all know, the U.S. Senate, in its infinite wisdom, decided to acquit Donald John Trump of the charges that the House had hit him with. All right, he's acquitted. All right, he's all powerful now. He can't be impeached, or at least for the moment. They could bring back impeachment. Anyway, so the Tribune recorded it with this headline, and I'll show it to the camera. Senate jury acquits Trump.
Very to the point.
Senate. The man loves the Tribune.
Very to the point. I like that.
My beloved bright one wrote this one. Teflon Don. I love Teflon Don. What do you think, D?
Live stream chat. Who wrote the better headline?
Teflon.
What are the headlines again?
Miles Kampf-Lassin has entered the studio. Miles Kampf-Lassin has entered the studio. Teflon Don.
From the Chicago Sun-Times.
Chicago Sun-Times.
And the Chicago Tribune. And the Chicago Tribune was...
Oh, I'm sorry. The Chicago Tribune was Senate jury acquits Trump. So you have Senate jury acquits Trump or Teflon Don.
I mean, I like the Tribune's very to the point. No messing around, all right?
Okay.
Explains it just well, you know. I like the
Well,
Tribune.
in defense of my beloved Bright One, above Teflon.
Oh, Pat Rott says Sun Times. Brianna says Sun Times.
Yeah, but because I don't know if you there was a mobster in New York, John Gotti. They called him Teflon John. He'd never get indicted or convicted by the feds. Anyway, Senate acquits Trump. So, you know, the Sun Times packaged the Senate acquits Trump, which is pretty much the same headline the Tribune has, but then they give you that little spice. Teflon Don.
All right.
But you know what? Miles Kampf-Lassin will have about a minute or two while we take this break, and he'll think it over, and he'll deliver his verdict on which headline is better.
There we go. I'm so glad you came in today for this one. It's the Ben Joravsky Show live from the Chicago Sun-Times. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Read the Chicago Reader to get up to speed on what's what in Chicago. Culture, food, arts and entertainment, weekly concert listings, weekly event listings, the environment, travel. I can continue, but you get the point. And for all of you Chicago political junkies, raw weekly columns on real city politics from Maya Dukmasova and our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader, free to the public in newsstands throughout the city and online at chicagoreader.com. Read it now and be a more informed Chicagoan.
Did you know that 40% of the people in Illinois opt to be cremated? Well, it's true. And Chicagoland Cremation Options honors their wishes by providing cremation services directly to the general public. Chicagoland Cremation Options provides an affordable, ethical, and easy cremation arrangement, whether in person or online. Save thousands and streamline the process by going directly to Chicagoland Cremation Options. It's a family-owned business operated by my good friend, Douglas Klein. Here's how you reach them. ChicagolandCremationOptions.com. One more time, ChicagolandCremationOptions.com.
Illinois is a state with a grand history of profound impact on our nation and our world. We've sent 4 transformative presidents to the White House. We were the first state to ratify 2 of the most important amendments to the U.S. Constitution, one abolishing slavery and another one granting women the right to vote. The first cell phone was invented here. So was the first television remote control and the first widely used internet browser. What all these things have in common
Commercial break over. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
It's Thursday, which means Miles Kampf-Lassin from In These Times is in the studio. Miles, we have a lot to talk about. Your insights on Iowa, I really enjoy and appreciate. We had a mini conversation at about, 10:30 today. I said, you know what, Miles, save it for the show. So we'll take that deep dive, but I got like 3 things I want to ask you. So we'll start with your verdict. A lot of pressure on you. You're the deciding vote. Which headline do you prefer about Donald Trump's acquittal by the Senate? The Tribune's Senate jury acquits Trump, or the Sun-Times, my beloved Bright One, Teflon Don? The ball's in your court.
Teflon Don. Got to go for it. I love a
Sun
pun.
times for the win.
I love a pun. Although, you mentioned earlier, John, it's about John Gotti, where they call him Teflon John or Teflon Don because he is a Don.
Yeah, I can't remember. I think it may be Teflon Don. Teflon Don works on so many levels
Yeah.
as a pun because his name is Donald.
Exactly.
And he acts like a gangster.
Exactly. He's a perfect phone call. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, the
he's
perfect
just
phone
trying
call.
to be the gangster president.
And
There's a
maybe-
different one. I forget what it, it clearly wasn't a Chicago one, but he was, at this National Prayer Club breakfast, this family thing today where he went on this tirade, of course, congratulating himself for his acquittal. And he had a newspaper that just said acquitted on it. And rather than doing any of the prayer stuff, he just holds up the paper. This guy.
He's out there. You know what I'm saying? And so many centrists who say Bernie can't win because, he took his shirt off and I don't know where he took his shirt. He was shirtless somewhere.
Yeah,
okay,
he's outside of the bounds of politics.
Yeah.
Therefore, he's unelectable. Look at this. Look
I
at
know,
Trump.
guys. It's the old rules have been broken. Have you been paying attention? Just think about. All right, let's get into the state of the state speech.
Yeah.
I was talking about my appreciation for Nancy Pelosi. Get your thoughts on that. Because she ripped up the speech. She was been blasted. I don't know if you've seen this mainstream media. She broke the protocol, etc., which is so bizarre that she be ripped. First of all, Trump refused to shake her hand. Secondly, the Senate Republicans were breaking into a chance of 4 more years. This is supposed to be the State of the Union.
And we remember, Joe Wilson, who yelled, "You lie" at Obama. I mean, this is in terms of like the protocol. The sad thing is, it kind of is theater in so many ways. The audience for this State of the Union dropped down precipitously from what it had been for previous ones because people are tuning it out. There's too much going on. This is the same week as the Iowa caucus, the same week as this impeachment trial.
And everyone in Chicago was that first Tuesday. So
That's true.
A lot of people. Thanks, Dave.
The great debate. But I mean, my main takeaway from the State of the Union, what an ugly, just disgusting speech. I mean, these tropes he was going in on these about these murderous immigrants, it just had this air of not only was there just blatant lies about the state of the economy, which we published an article on In These Times, kind of debunking some of these myths that Trump has been trumpeting about. These are. We're seeing record growth and economy's never been better when in fact, wages are down, jobs are still going overseas. These trade deals are going to screw American workers. So, I mean, there's a lot of lies from Trump, which we could expect, but also, he went kind of full Steve Bannon. And this is what I really see in his presidency. This has been the core element that has animated his entire presidency is this true demagoguery of saying, your enemies are these murderous immigrants that are coming in and we need to, do everything we can to go after sanctuary cities and, sanctuary states. And so it's understandable that Nancy Pelosi, not just ripped up the speech, but if you watch throughout the speech, she's kind of looks disgusted because it's this really vile rhetoric that we have not seen. State of the Unions are usually where there's some type of, extending your hand and trying to call towards unity and stuff. It should be very clear to everybody on both sides of the aisle. Those days are done. That is not how politics is being operated in Washington right now. It's, a full out fight and, it's a grab for power. And that's how I think if you oppose Donald Trump, you should be approaching this, not trying to, compromise with the type of really racist approach to the presidency that he's brought into office, and that was made very clear to me through the State of the Union.
It began with his inauguration speech, and I thought the inauguration speech was
American carnage and all of that.
Yeah, it was very similar. And they put the bar really low in terms of what he's inheriting, so that you think he's inheriting just utter chaos and ruin. And now he's trying. He's proclaiming every problem fixed, and I made America great again. Yeah.
And it's true. It's this Steve Bannon and, as you mentioned, Stephen Miller too. I mean, these are people that they practice in ethno-nationalism. The things that they talk about are, believing that we should have some kind of white ethno-state. We need to restrict not just what they would call legal immigration, undocumented people in the U.S. They want to shut down all immigration. That's their fantasy. That's their goal, and that is really a sick right-wing approach to government that by far most Americans do not agree with. That is just a far extreme, far right goal, and the fact that it has any advocates in the White House is just really disgusting. So luckily, we have a chance to get rid of that this year.
This is something that really irritates me as a lefty. Bernie Sanders' position on most of the issues are closer to what I believe the majority of Americans, how the majority of Americans view it by polls. Donald Trump's are more extreme than what most Americans do. And yet, the way the game is played, it's as though Bernie Sanders is the extremist and that Donald Trump represents what? The mainstream view. Donald Trump in his speech had his denunciation of socialism, socialist medicine. We're going to have American medicine. Like, what the hell does that even mean?
Yeah. American medicine is apparently, $50,000 medical debt and, co-pays and deductibles and not being able to, splitting your medicine in half because you can't afford it. This is like EpiPens costing 1,000% more than they do in Europe. That's American medicine. That's the status quo we're living under. So I don't think most people are happy with that. And that's true because the number one concern from Democratic voters in all of these polls, number one issue is healthcare, and of course the person they trust the most on that issue is Bernie Sanders, who's running on a universal Medicare for all proposal that would eliminate all those, really draconian elements of our healthcare system that exist now and punish poor and working class people.
Yeah, and the person they should trust the least on healthcare is Donald Trump,
who tried to strip 32 million Americans of healthcare. I mean, that was what happened in 2018. It was a really, I think that election was a referendum on Trump and the Republicans trying to take away healthcare.
Don't use past tense. He still has his lawyers in court trying to strip healthcare benefits away from people, and Nancy Pelosi, by the way, here's an interesting thing. I hope it comes to this. I don't know if it will come to this, so I'm really looking far ahead. But if Bernie Sanders is elected president, most likely the Speaker of the House that he'll be dealing with to get his agenda through will be Nancy Pelosi. Yeah. Really be interesting to see how that plays out. But anyway, I can only hope something like that happens. All right, before we hit to Iowa, just your thoughts. You were at the audience at First Tuesday. You saw Carlos Ramirez Rosa battling it out, representing Bernie Sanders versus Brandon Johnson, who was representing Elizabeth Warren, two very young champions of progressivity here in the city of Chicago. Very two good on their feet speakers. Oh yeah, quick thinkers. What was your thought on how they performed?
I really enjoyed it. I thought also, it was incredible. You and Maya didn't say a word. It was pretty much all Brandon and Carlos going in. And, to set it up for listeners who might not know, Brandon was representing Elizabeth Warren because he is a surrogate for her. And Carlos Ramirez Rosa, of course, backing Bernie Sanders. So kind of having a proxy debate there. And I thought they're both really, really good speakers. Both of them have a clear mastery of the issues that working class people care about. They clearly both have a passion for it. This it was almost silly because they're both saying the same thing. Clearly, everything they agree on. It's just the question of who is the better champion of that. And in that way, I didn't think it was a completely fair fight because Bernie Sanders has won Iowa and Elizabeth Warren is not performing quite as well. She doesn't have clearly the same amount of grassroots backing across the country that Sanders does. So in that way, I think that Carlos was more effective just because I think the case for Bernie Sanders as the representative of the campaign that is representing this broad movement, as you can see from people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar backing him, but also the grassroots organizations that Carlos talked about that are really made up of working class people of color, groups like People's Action and Center for Popular Democracy. They've all signed on to the Bernie Sanders campaign as a movement, as a vehicle to implement their vision of social change. You just saw that with United Working Families here, who just endorsed Bernie Sanders as well. And this is the group, they've got CTU and other unions, but these are really the most progressive, the most left-wing of the labor movement groups in Chicago. And they were instrumental in seeing this sea change in the city council we had in 2019 with all these new great advocates, just like Jeanette Taylor, you were talking about before. I mean, these are the kind of groups that have been able to influence electoral politics really in a very incredible way. And the fact that they're on board with Bernie Sanders, I think, speaks to the argument that Carlos was making.
But the main point that Brandon was making, and by the way, D, are we going to be able to download it and so people can hear it?
Yeah, I'll have that available for download first Tuesday.
Folks can hear it so they can hear what we're talking about. But the counterpunch that Brandon came in on was the issues of reparations, which I haven't heard raised in a while since I think it was Marianne Williamson brought it up in the first or second debate. I can't remember which one it was. And he was saying that part of the reason why he supported Elizabeth Warren is that she had signed on to reparations. So, two strong voices from the progressive left weighing in on the race. All right, let's get down to business, man. Iowa. The first Tuesday was the day after Iowa, and at that moment, most of the mainstream media was saying that Pete Buttigieg was the victor. Pete Buttigieg himself, what an operator. And no votes have been counted, and he announced that he was the victor. He was victorious, and thank you. Then he was given interviews in New Hampshire the next day where he was like getting teary-eyed at what it all meant. And I don't know. It looks as though he may not have won the Iowa. We still don't know who won the Iowa caucus, do we yet?
I think we do, and I think that the answer is Bernie Sanders. I think your listeners know that. I think people, around the country look at what just happened and what an absurd travesty of democracy to have this situation where we're waiting, we're days later. It's Thursday afternoon. These caucuses happened Monday night. We still don't have full reporting. And what we also just saw is apparently Tom Perez, the head of the DNC, just ordered a recanvass, essentially a recount of the results. And that happened on the verge of, 97% had been reported, and these remaining precincts that were left were from satellite caucuses. These are areas for people that either had to work the night shift, so that they set them up earlier in the day. So these are, often laborers, and for non-native English speakers. So they had, Swahili, they had Spanish, of course, different languages. This is the first year Iowa offered this, which is great, but they didn't count these until the end. And by all marks, and I mean, I was in Iowa working on these satellite caucuses as well. Bernie was running the table on it. There was none of these other campaigns were doing outreach. And these are some of the poorest, most these immigrant working class communities where the Sanders campaign was doing outreach. These are what's left to be counted. Look, Bernie Sanders, not only did he get more than 6,000 more votes than his closest competitor in the first round in terms of popular vote. He's still led by 2,500 after the second alignment, whatever that when people from different campaigns that didn't reach a threshold had to realign. He still won by 2,500 votes. And by the end of this, there's almost no doubt that they're going to get the same number of state delegates, Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders, because of how the geography works out. But if Bernie's leading by 6,000 votes, and in terms of these state-based equivalents, the state delegates, right now there's 3 out of over 1,000 of these state delegates that are separating them. So this is it's absurd to think that as a result of this, Pete Buttigieg is somehow the winner of the Iowa caucus. But it speaks to this arcane way of enumerating these delegates. So for me, I mean, it's hard to look at this and take away anything else than Bernie Sanders got the most votes. Bernie Sanders is going to have a big lead on delegates. He's going into New Hampshire on Tuesday night with a huge lead. He raised $25 million in the month of January alone. That's more than most of his competitors make in a whole quarter. The energy in the Democratic Party, the energy in the Democratic primary is with Bernie Sanders right now, and I understand that there's a lot of hand-wringing going on around that. I don't know, I can't speak to exactly the mechanizations of why they decided to release these results, how they did and why they did, but there's, looking at what happened there, I have to say it is like a travesty of democracy, but Bernie Sanders has the momentum, and I think we're going to see after Tuesday night, it's going to, reshape this field even more. And the real takeaway besides all of that, Joe Biden got in fourth. This is the person that, establishment of the Democratic Party has been telling us for a better part of a year is the most electable candidate. This is who is the safest bet for Democrats to take on Donald Trump. He got, almost about half of the votes that Bernie Sanders got in Iowa. If this is really the person who is the strongest candidate for Democrats to be their standard bearer in 2020, how can you, look at those results and still believe that? So, I mean, there's a long way to go. This was only one caucus, and the first in the country. But I think it should be very clear to people looking which way the winds are blowing, and the type of and the campaign that is best to get behind, that is strongest to defeat Donald Trump in November.
Well, the reaction to Bernie Sanders, I get. Let me put it to you this way, Miles. I'm exposed to many people who really don't like Bernie Sanders. Sure. Okay. And more to the point, they don't like Bernie Sanders supporters.
Yeah.
And I try to be as fair as I can in figuring out why they have the aversion to Sanders that they do. And it's a wide array. There's people who are just ideologically opposed to him. They don't believe in his leftist worldview. There's people who despise his supporters and their online presence. There's Hillary Clinton supporters who are still bitter from 2016. Those wounds have not healed. I don't think they'll ever heal fully. And then there's just your basic Dems who are angry at him, don't like him because he kind of makes them look bad. See, it's just like a wide range of people. And right now I'm seeing Bernie. I bet you Bernie's got like 30 to 35% of the Dems, the Democratic voters in his primary. It's the rest that could give him serious problems going through for all the different reasons. Yeah. So what do you think is it something Bernie could do to win them over, or should he just ignore them and that opposition and plow ahead?
Well, I don't think that in terms of doing anything, I mean, he's not going to change what he's been saying for the past 40 years of his political career. I mean, there's nothing that what the Sanders campaign represents really is a threat to much of what has long existed as, what people use as a common expression as the Democratic establishment. But these are all of the, the think tanks. These are all the, media representatives. These are the paid operatives, all the people that kind of make up what has been the Democratic consensus for a very long time. And they are overrepresented in mainstream media. So when you look and you turn on cable news, or even when you look on social media, these are the kind of people you see. And I think that this is really the type of individual that you're talking about primarily. And those people are not going to wake up in the morning and sign on board and say, oh, we believe in, everything that Bernie Sanders has been fighting for 40 years. They're not going to do that. That said, if the democratic will of the people is expressed in such a way that shows Bernie Sanders is clearly the top choice, what will they do? We don't know what they're going to do, but the thing to do at that point is to get on board and say, this guy is our best chance to beat Donald Trump. This is the person who has the energy, the momentum, and whose agenda best represents what voters actually want. Because in terms of the voters, they're not thinking how these establishment plenty of people, I think, are worried, understandably, about the ability of the Democratic Party in 2020 to take on Donald Trump after we saw a disastrous and humiliating defeat 4 years ago. That's understandable. That said, you got to pick somebody to run against Donald Trump. And right now, when we look at this field of candidates, the clear the best individual was built a campaign that can build a coalition. It's going to bring in new voters. I mean, people have been talking about, the turnout wasn't as high in Iowa this time as people had hoped. That's true. But if you look at the areas where it was higher, it's the youth vote. The youth vote was higher this time than it was in 2008 when Obama ran in terms of 17 to 29-year-olds. So there are new voters that are getting engaged, and I think it has to. And Bernie Sanders understandably won that demographic overwhelmingly in the Iowa caucus. So I think you've got to look at who's gonna best do this. And you even saw, I think it was today, Jason Johnson, who's the politics editor at The Root. This is somebody that had written off Bernie Sanders' candidacy before. Last year he said Bernie would be out by August. This is no friend of Bernie Sanders. He went on and said, look, I'm looking at it right now, and if I see Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders, Bernie's the best person to expand the electorate and to take on Donald Trump. So I don't think it's going to be a complete, come to Bernie moment for everybody, but I think that in that media and political establishment, but I do think eventually it's going to become very clear that you've got to, make a choice and get on board the best campaign that is positioned to beat Donald Trump, and that is Bernie Sanders.
All right, Miles. Now, you and I exist in it's the alternative media.
Yeah.
I've lived there my whole life. That's where I've worked my whole life. The alternative media. I'm just not ready for a mainstream guy. Mm-hmm. You're much younger than me, but you're on the path to a lifetime on alternative media. So from your vantage point in alternative media, do you believe that the establishment media, or what we call the mainstream media, the Washington Post, the New York Times, CBS, ABC, NBC, all the CNN, all of them, put Fox out of it because they're completely right-wing controlled. Do you think they have a bias against Bernie?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a structural bias. I don't think it's individual people saying they don't like Bernie. I think that's plenty true. And if you look at the kind of guests that are booked on these networks, when was the last time you saw a real pro-Bernie voice? Every once in a while, we were talking about this, every once in a while CNN will have on Crystal Ball, who has a show on The Hill. She was previous MSNBC anchor. She's pretty outspoken Bernie advocate, but there's a complete dearth of pro-Bernie voices on these outlets, and I think it speaks to the incentives that these networks have, and it has to do with the kind of organizations that are funding them. I mean, these are for-profit media entities, and they're running ads for pharmaceutical companies that would stand to lose tons of money if there was a Medicare for All system that provided, cheaper prescription drugs for seniors and other Americans. I mean, there's a actual incentive question here that has to do with the people that are, in the boardrooms that are making those decisions, not necessarily the journalists or the editors. And I don't, decry any of them for doing their jobs in these networks and these, media outlets. But of course, I think that there is a bias, and that's when I talk about, how I approach it as, I'm pretty open about my politics, my political leanings, and even my preferences when it comes to, electoral politics. It's because I'm, pretty transparent about where, I land on these things. And I think we should see more of that. And honestly, Fox is like that too. I mean, I completely disagree with the political program they're pushing, but they're at least explicit for the most part in the fact that they are. It's basically Trump TV, that they've sewn up that cohort, and they're speaking to the president, and they're trying to provide both a megaphone for him and also a way to influence him on policy. There's nothing like that on the Democratic side, besides the fact that Bernie Sanders is going to build up his own media empire. If you look, he's got way more engagement on social media and through these various channels. He's created his podcast, he does these Facebook Lives, and that goes back to when he was mayor of Burlington. He had that Bernie Talks to the Community show.
It shows a trip, man.
It shows a trip. You want to go back to the 80s and take a
My
rewind.
Lord, Bernie.
Things have upgraded a little bit since Bernie Talks to the Community. But I think that that's the kind of, way to speak directly to people that we just don't have right now. There's all these barriers through mainstream media, and I think that's how you saw with all these Iowa results being recorded. The New York Times had the needle.
All right, let's talk about this. This gets into, again, a little more specificity, the mainstream media and their approach to Iowa. Now, I've followed this one closely, and I think I told you this, I had Bernie supporters calling me up, yelling at me, blank New York Times. They were so mad at the New York Times. They're so mad at Rachel Maddow's station, just blanked on the name of it.
MSNBC.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
MSNBC, man. They all they have are libs. They don't have any real lefties. You got to say that on the air. They suck. Da 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 da. And I don't watch it, so but I do read the New York Times. The New York Times had this cockamamie needle thing. Like old Cub fans remember the Sean-O-meter that somebody had in the stands at Wrigley Field back in the day. And every time Sean Dunston got a hit, his batting average would go up and the meter would go up. It was some hokey thing that Cub fans came up with. It was kind of funny. But the New York Times has got this meter thing where the needle goes dee 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 dee. Pete Buttigieg has got a 9. They were in Lodge and Pete Buttigieg had 95%. Going to win the Iowa caucus, and I'm like, Bernie Sanders is winning the vote. So already there's a disconnect because if you look at the actual numbers, Bernie Sanders is winning the vote, and you look at their cockamamie needle thing, it says that Pete Buttigieg has a 95% chance. So how do you deal with that obvious disconnect? Do you think it's just like the New York Times is too into the weeds for its own good? Do you think that the New York Times got played by the Pete Buttigieg campaign, who was pretty slick about claiming victory before any votes were counted? Or do you think the New York Times was just like beaming out what it wanted? Come on, Pete. Come on, Pete. I mean, where do you fall in that?
I don't know if, the editors or the, whatever app creators, technology gurus that are behind this glorious needle were on the side of Pete, but I do know that it was, as you said, it was about to break off of its because it said it was 95% for Pete, and now, lo and behold, apparently they weren't factoring in these satellite caucuses that went overwhelmingly for Bernie. So now they got rid of the needle. They took the needle off the page.
And he brought it back.
Now they brought back the needle. Now the needle's saying 54% Bernie. So, we saw this in 2016, right? We saw all these polls. It said all that, we got to believe what Bernie's campaign says, what AOC says frequently is we don't watch the polls. We change the polls. It's not about just being a passive observer or trying to act as a political pundit, which is how so much political engagement exists right now. It's about actually getting involved and saying, they're gonna do their thing. What they're gonna say, whatever they're gonna say. But if we bring out enough people, if we organize enough people, if we knock on enough doors, if we raise enough grassroots donations and do actual voter outreach, just like the Bernie campaign did with these, Sudanese communities, with these Ethiopian pork workers, who overwhelmingly went for Bernie Sanders. That's how you win an election. And that, the media is going to take a while to catch up. Clearly, they got to take down their needle. They got to bring back their needle, jump through all these hoops. I will say on the, question of Buttigieg, it was savvy in a way, I guess, for him to just proclaim himself victorious with 0% in, because that did grant him some headlines. I think it is completely abominable to do that and claim to be, an honest politician. I think it's hard for anybody to look at this and say this guy is, somebody I want to get behind and support after he pulls a stunt like this, after he's trying to portray himself as like the Obama 2.0, this is his whole thing. I'm this young, fresh face. I'm going to bring these fresh new ideas. That said, nobody can name any of these new ideas Pete's running on. But besides any of that, they spiked this Des Moines Register poll 2 days before. His campaign's gloating about how they got this poll, the gold standard poll killed days before the caucus. Then, Liz Smith, his New York operative, tells him to go out there. This is just, we're just seeing kind of the things that make people most cynical about politics happen in front of our faces. So I think people are fed up with that.
Well, there is a lot of cynicism that grows out of it. And there's also a notion, hey, you do what you got to do to win an election. And so Pete Slick, I got to give him credit. He declared himself the victor, even though no votes were count. And it worked.
Well,
the New York Times little meter said, Buttigieg.
Well, and that's the sad thing. I mean, as I mentioned before, the real takeaway from this should be in the Iowa caucus. Yeah, Pete did well. I'm not going to deny that. He got a lot of support. Bernie Sanders got far more. Bernie Sanders got 6,000 more votes in the first round than his closest competitor. And when in a state like Iowa, that's an overwhelming show of support, and in terms of him being the victor in the popular vote totals. But also Joe Biden got in fourth. I mean, this is Joe Biden's campaign had a disastrous finish, and there's no other way to look at it. Even with rose-tinted glasses, what Biden did was just was a very sad showing for somebody that's claimed to be the front runner for this whole race. And yet, as you said, because, Pete claimed victory and they refused to release these results and everybody's like, what the hell's going on? The headlines aren't talking about those very clear takeaways from this. So I think people, we got to put this behind us. New Hampshire is in a few days. There's going to be a plenty new set of media narratives to come out of that. After that, it's Nevada, South Carolina. We're going to have Super Tuesday. So strap in because, they're going to keep, this is not the last time we're going to see some hijinks is what I predict. But that is not going to change the fact that Bernie Sanders is winning.
All right, we got Ed Maher on deck. He's going to give us the labor perspective on all this madness that's going out. The Democrats trying to figure out who is the best suited to run against Donald John Trump. Before I let you go, want to plug an article or anything from In These Times?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I just put up a few articles today, one of which is on a group of workers in the Bay Area who have just announced a unionization campaign at the Tartine Bakery in the Bay Area, which is very exciting because this is, these are service workers, announced a campaign to unionize, hundreds of them. So check that out In These Times. I wrote an article myself on kind of, pushing back on all this media hand-wringing over the term socialism and how socialism is going to be such a big liability for Bernie Sanders in the general election. Based on the Iowa results. I mean, I think that it's a clear indication that voters are going to get over that and they're going to vote for the agenda they think best represents them and not be scared off by terminology, even if Joe Biden's trying to raise these fears, which he was the other day. So that's an article called Bernie's Feat in Iowa Shows Democratic Socialism Can Win by myself. So check that out. At InTheseTimes.com.
All right, very good. Miles Kampf-Lassin is here every Thursday from In These Times. Appreciate it, Miles. Ed Maher on deck. We're going to bring him on when we return. Hey, everybody. What you're about to hear are the piano stylings of Jeff Manuel. Man, listen to Jeff go. Jeff Manuel has been playing piano around Chicago for years. He's played for conventions, for celebrities, played in basement bars with blues bands. He's played at prestigious social clubs, fine restaurants, and in the intimacy of private homes. Book Jeff Manuel at jeffemanuelpianist.com. Don't worry, I'll spell his name at the end of this commercial. You know what Chicago Magazine said? They said that Jeff Manuel is, quote, as comfortable with Chopin as he is with Cole Porter. He's excellent and his performance is joyous. He offers an elegant stream of compositions and interpretations that entertains the mind but won't hurt the ears. To hear more of Jeff Manuel's work and to book Jeff for your next event, go to jeffmanuelpianist.com. I'm going to spell it out for you, people. J-E-F-F. M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, UELPIANIST.com. Take it away, Jeff Manuel.
Ram, Vice President Joe Biden made one of his final moves before the debate starts to show a video of him basically bear hugging President Obama. Smart move. Why is he doing that?
I think he also got a hug back.
Yeah, he did.
But no, yeah, it's a smart move. It's his calling card. It's why he has the strength he has among Democratic voters is because he served with a very, very popular president. It's what surprised me in the last debate when people were throwing the president under the bus. I mean, you have a person who's at 90-some-odd% popularity with Democrats. That is not a smart strategy. I do agree with Matt. This is going to be about the energy. There's more about a chemistry that you're going to associate, and the closer the candidate can put their own story with the story of where people live their lives, the better they're going to be. They're not going to follow all the details about this policy versus that policy. It's about relating and they feeling that they can relate to that candidate and that they understand them where they live their lives.
I've seen a whole lot of catfish, some turtles. No gators yet, though.
Oh, thanks, random hipster. Hour number 2 of your Ben Joravsky show for Thursday, February 6th is moments away. But before we get into that, we got to thank the following unions again for sponsoring this program. Unions like the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace, not Aerosmith Workers, Local 126 and District 8, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150, and of course, today's Ben Joravsky show for Thursday, February 6th is brought to you by our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. Ben, don't talk about the NBA trades. Hour number 2, let's go. It is Thursday, February 6th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. In this hour of the program, Union man Ed Maher is back, and we welcome record store owner Paul Ruffino. And now your host. If it was a record put out after the year 1979, he has no clue what it is. Chicago Reader columnist Ben Joravsky.
Ed Maher from Operating Engineers Local 150 in the studio. We're going to be talking to Department of Labor appointees, not union friendly to put it mildly. We're going to be talking about Trump's State of the Union and what it means for labor. And Ed's got some interesting results from a poll of their members that are well worth discussing. We're going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about a Jimmy Hoffa book, even if nobody else wants to talk about it, because I'm really into Jimmy Hoffa these days.
This month in, the Ben Joravsky Book Club?
Yes, the Ben Joravsky Book Club is a book called In the Shadow of Hoffa by Jack Goldsmith, which I obsessively read, Ed, in about 2 nights of just all-night reading. Fascinating book. All right, I'll get it out of the way early. Just, it is so great on so many levels. If you want to know what it was like to organize the Teamsters, what Jimmy Hoffa had to do to organize the Teamsters, good and bad.
Sure.
The connection to the mob. And Jimmy, he won me over. Nobody complained about mob influence when the owners who were trying to break the union were using mob thugs to beat up union organizers. Just saying
For
that,
sure.
Ed,
The
okay?
Pinkertons.
Yeah, Pinkerton. But when I mean raw mobsters
Right.
in Detroit. But when Jimmy Hoffa cut the deal with the mobsters, anyway, it gets into government overreach and Bobby Kennedy's role in wiretapping. Pretty much, they were wiretapping all the Jimmy Hoffa's house, wherever he stayed. It was like a 4-year, 5-year effort to bring him down. And then, of course, it gets into the intricacies of who was behind his murder. And I'll just give it away, a little spoiler alert, everything you see in the movie The Irishman is made up. Okay, can we just say that right now?
It's still a good movie.
It's a great flick. I loved it, and I've watched it once. I'll probably watch it again, but totally fictitious. Jack Goldsmith in the Shadow. Hoffa cannot recommend it enough. All right, D, you got an update for me?
Absolutely I do. Hey, whose name's on that banner right there?
Ben Joravsky.
You talk about whatever you want, buddy.
Oh, thank
All right?
you, sir. I appreciate that. God. Okay, how about that NBA draft?
Okay,
today?
not everything that you want.
Sorry.
Illinois
How the
Gov.
Bulls do.
Yeah.
Oh boy,
Sad. That hurt.
not well, as you can tell. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. Well, hey, you can't win them all, buddy.
I'm not a perfect person.
This just in: Rich Miller, the meanest Illinois political bulldog in the yard of
Miller's
Capital
tough.
Facts.
Gotta love him.
CapitalFacts.com. Go check it out. A fantastic source for Illinois news. J.B. Pritzker, for the first time, had a veto overridden. Yes.
Wow, I missed this.
Illinois lawmakers have voted to override a veto by Governor J.B. Pritzker that protects a tax exemption on aircraft parts. A 54-1 Senate vote Wednesday followed a unanimous House vote a day earlier. The override forgives $50 million in past due taxes from private jet manufacturers and extends them to 2024. Lawmakers approved the tax break in 2010. It expired in 2014, but regulators took no notice, and repair outfits did not collect the tax from jet owners.
I wish I could offer some valuable insights on this, but this is the first I've heard of it. So I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert. You know, usually, Ed, I pretend I'm an expert on everything. And usually I get, even if I'm not an expert, I do a little cribbing, like 5 minutes. But this one caught me completely off guard.
It sounds like the people who ride private jets are having some costs passed through to them. And, you know, I feel for those people that are Money's tight when you're in that
Rich?
circle.
Yeah.
You know, we've got to look out for them because they look out for us.
Yeah, they're really looking out for us. Yeah, I
Looking
just
out their
remember
window.
when Mayor Daley tore up Meigs Field, and all these people who own private jets were outraged. I don't know if you were around for that. And I was critical of Mayor Daley, but that was one of those moments where I'm like, a private airfield for rich people to get in and out of town, or a park? I think I'm going with Mayor Daley on that one. So it's one of the few times Mayor Daley and I saw eye to eye.
It was a boss move.
It was.
I mean, you kidding me?
Oh my God, Jimmy Hoffa would have been like
in the middle of the night. Yeah.
Oh, I like that kid.
Love it or hate it, it's done.
No, man, he just he waited till he was safely reelected. Okay, came right after an election, and then he tore it up, and then everybody was aghast. Oh my God, like what? Where do you think you were living? Okay, people, you know, we have an all-powerful mayor. That's what he does. Anyway, so, all right, very good. Rich Miller, thank you for the update, Dennis. All right, Ed Maher, much to talk about and discuss. I'm through talking about the Jimmy Hoffa book, at least for the moment. Department of Labor appointees and updates. We've talked about this in the past. Donald Trump does not have a benevolent view of labor rights, to put it mildly, at least in terms of the people he appoints to run the Department of Labor. So one more time, talk about why it's significant who Donald Trump appoints to the Department of Labor.
Sure. I mean, this all kind of gets back to the struggle that unions are having right now in explaining to our members that the economy is good. You know, the approval rating and some of the favorability that Donald Trump has among blue-collar workers. You know, what's the reason for it? It's the economy is stupid. You know, look at 401ks. They see 401ks going up. They've been working. You know, the economy has been pretty good, as it frankly was the last couple of years under Barack Obama as well. But there's a lot going on behind the scenes. There are moves being directly made that are very bad for unions. And so it's a tough thing for unions to tell our members about these things that sometimes it gets a little bit into the weeds, but it's very important. When you know, a lot of their energy is just focused on, you know, I worked 60 hours this week, or I haven't gotten laid off for the winter, and it's, you know, January, and that's a real thing. So it's a bit of a struggle, and plus you've got Trump out there saying things like, you know, your union bosses are going to tell you I'm no good, but it's, you know, don't believe them. And so when you say like, hey, there's this stuff going on with the Department of Labor, they're like, that's what he said you were going to say.
Yeah.
So he had appointed Eugene Scalia to run the United States Department of Labor, and he had, I think, been general counsel or assistant general counsel under George W. Bush. But of course, he is son of the late great Antonin Scalia of the formerly of the United States Supreme Court. And there's a little bit of a theory that he's just kind of sitting in this spot until there's another vacancy, and then they're going to put him up on the Supreme Court. But he's not a worker-friendly person. He did a lot during his time at the Department of Labor that was bad for workers and just sort of preferential for corporations over their employees. So what he's done in the last couple of weeks is there's been a lot of criticism from hardcore conservatives that the Department of Labor has not been harsh enough on unions, you know, on financial investigations, on things like that. So what he's done is he's hired a couple of think tankers and professional, you know, they call them union avoidance consultants. So if you have a business and some people start to talk about forming a union, you could hire a union avoidance consultant who basically comes in and bends the law to, you know, within a centimeter of its breaking point to dissuade these workers or threaten these workers or punish these workers for, you know, trying to push collectively for a better life for themselves. So he hired two people who are going to be special assistants at the Department of Labor's Office of Labor Management Standards. And one of them brags about being behind the largest union decertification campaign. He worked on a campaign in Minnesota to get more than 20,000 home health care workers to decertify from their union. And his name's Rusty Brown. And then there's another named Trey Kovacs. And he's not even in business for himself. He's just an author at a think tank. He writes policy papers about how bad unions are for the American economy. And now he's going to be working for the Department of Labor, which, I mean, let's not forget, originally the goal of the Department of Labor was to promote peace, promote labor peace, you know, to try to find a good balance between employers and employees that would kind of keep harmony through the throughout the economy, and that's been, you know, up until, I don't know, maybe Reagan, that was the labor policy of the United States, was just to promote harmony between employers and employees. But it's kind of all going out the window. It's straight up sycophants that are getting put in here that are going to run roughshod and you know, plant landmines in places that are going to take generations to find and undo. You know, if a more friendly administration does come to take back the Department of Labor at any time. So I mean, these are the things. Working from a union for a union, we see things like this going on. They're starting campaigns against worker centers. So worker centers are not unions. They don't engage in collective bargaining. They're more or less sort of informal organizations that help low wage and a lot of immigrant workers fight for some of the most basic workers' rights, basic human rights. And these two individuals are specifically targeting worker centers, saying that they should be regulated and restricted just the same way that unions are. And I think there's a special place in hell for people who go out of their way to take away the rights of low-wage workers. You know, usually think about it, the hardest working person in the world is probably making almost nothing for his or her work. And these are the people that need protection and need a hand.
Yeah.
Or, you know, I guess conservatives might say they just need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, or, you know, one of those really cute sayings that they love to throw around. But these are the people that are being hired within the administration. And it's going on in various areas, branches, whether it's OSHA, which governs occupational safety and health, wage and hour enforcement to make sure that people aren't being, you know, totally screwed with on their paychecks, and if they are, that it's rectified. Those departments are just being gutted, and they're adding staff to places that will just try to dismantle unions or take away unions' power. So we did a poll, the Operating Engineers Local 150, we've got 23,000 members across 3 states. So we did a poll of our membership. You know, we did this probably 10 years ago, and we found that for primary voters, we were about 50-50 Democrat-Republican. It was like 51% Democrat, 49% Republican. And that was kind of surprising to a lot of people, because the reputation of unions is that everybody's a Democrat, just, you know, a bleeding heart liberal. It's absolutely not the case. So we did another poll, and we found that right now, a third of our members identify as Republicans, a third as Democrats, and a third is independents. More and more of the younger workers are identifying as independents. But it used to be, you know, 50% Democrat, 20% Republican, and those numbers are moving very quickly. So we found that support for the president among union members, and this is our union, and it's consistent across the building trades, is very high. It's a lot higher than any one of the Democratic challengers, which is alarming.
When you say high, do you mean above 50%?
I think in our union, the job approval for the president was 49%. It was higher than that across our international union, but within the 3 states where we represent workers, it was a little bit lower. We like to think it's because we do a good job of, you know, communicating these issues to our members.
I'm just going to throw this out before you continue. 49% is roughly where he is his job approval rating right now in the country. So essentially what you're telling me,
or you know, it's support or oppose. That's the way the question was asked. But when compared with Democratic candidates, there wasn't a single Democratic candidate that had more supporters than opposition. I mean, we're talking 25% support to 50% opposed. It was shocking.
Yeah.
The numbers again that we saw locally were a little bit better than what we saw across the country, but it was alarming. And then it was sort of the issues that are important to voters or to our members were labor rights, the economy, healthcare, retirement security. So some of the things that have happened with retirement security, first off, there was an attack that's being led by Republicans right now, Senators Chuck Grassley and Lamar Alexander, to just completely dismantle multi-employer pensions across the country. Our members are aware of that, so he got kind of bad marks on that. And then he slipped, what was it, about a week and a half ago when he said that there were going to have to be limitations or reforms made to Medicare and Medicaid, which, anybody who noticed that there was a massive tax break for corporations knew that the next step was taking away healthcare for healthcare and Social Security for working class people. But it's a challenge, as I said before. We're faced with a very serious challenge because as a labor union, we don't take positions on guns. We don't take positions on abortion. We don't take positions on any social issues. Everybody feels the way that they feel about them, and we encourage people to vote their conscience on everything. But our job in representing our members is to give them recommendations on who to vote for based on their ability to protect workers' rights, protect wage standards to ensure that people continue to make good money, and their willingness to invest in infrastructure and create jobs and just, modern or maintain a modern infrastructure, or I guess reintroduce a modern infrastructure in America because our infrastructure is falling apart. And in that along those lines, it would be very, very difficult to make a case for the president because the things that are being done behind the scenes they're nefarious. I mean, they'll take generations to undo.
Yeah.
But you'll see it, things like the State of the Union when he comes out and talks about, I support workers 100%. It works. It's, I don't know if I can swear on here, but I want to. It's nonsense.
It's a podcast.
Let's say it's nonsense. How about that? My mom might be listening.
Yeah, your mom. Right. Ryan Kelly used to swear all the time on this show.
Yeah.
So great footsteps to follow in.
Right on. But I mean, it doesn't make any sense, and facts don't seem to really matter. But he's getting through, and it just makes the challenge that much larger for unions that are kind of having to clean up the mess.
All right, let's make a point about Donald Trump up front right now. And Donald Trump is a master of media. And I think I said this to you on the phone today. I may have said it to you in the show before, Ed. Donald Trump learned the tricks of the trade by dominating the New York media when he turned himself into a celebrity in the 80s and the 90s. I don't know if you know this, but in the wrestling game, in the boxing game, he learned pretty much everything he needs to know from wrestling. And I'm a fan of wrestling, so I know the games they play. And I see him doing this. I'm like, oh my God, this is Vince McMahon. This is 101.
I mean, look at the State of the Union. He's giving away scholarships, and I mean that's all great. Let's not pretend it's genuine. I mean, you give away one scholarship, and you focus the attention of the nation on one scholarship instead of trying to put some sort of a plan in place to give many children those opportunities. I mean, it's just pure showmanship. Giving the Medal of Freedom to Rush Limbaugh, in the chamber, having Melania, and I mean, I swear to God, when he introduced and thanked Melania for something or another during the State of the Union, they showed her face, and I was waiting for her to smile. She didn't smile. I mean, I think she's probably a very nice person. I have no reason to think she's not a wonderful person, but I think it's just maybe toward Donald. And, I think the last woman who looked at me like that took half my pension.
Okay. That sounds like a whole separate show to discuss.
Yeah, after hours. We'll do that.
That's half my pension. That sounds like a country western song, Half My Pension.
That's a good idea.
Last woman who looked at me who took half my pension. But the point I'm making that he's a master of this, and I'm leaving out the 21st century when he had the #1 show in America, Celebrity Apprentice and all that, Apprentice, and he's a huckster. And when he says something like, "Your union bosses will say we are no good," and then, so you point out some, objective criticism of Trump, how an appointee led a decertification process, and now this person's in a position to change the laws so that it's easier to decertify a union, okay, or harder to form a union. These are very real.
Or easier to fire people without consequences, or easier to in a conflict, or like if a worker brought charges against their employer for a blatant violation of their rights, it's easier for the employer to get away with it. Just all it takes is a tweak of a couple of words in labor policy or one decision from a labor board to change the way that all of this works. And since the president took over and appointed a labor board, it's all slanting. And the Supreme Court is doing the same thing, but it's all slanted toward employers. I mean, employees, frankly, have no idea how many of their rights have been given up, whether it's, if you come to work tomorrow, you're agreeing to non-binding arbitration for wage complaints. You can't sue your employer. You have to go to non-binding arbitration. And if you don't agree, then don't come to work tomorrow. Like, that was a Supreme Court case, and it held up. I mean, they voted along partisan lines, but that's the kind of stuff that's happening. And workers are being kind of left without any sort of recourse to fight for anything.
So when you are talking to a member, and he or she comes back at you and said, that's what Trump said you were going to tell us, how do you respond to that?
I mean, it's all that we can say is that it's our job. Our members are equipment operators, and they're great at what they do, and they're highly intelligent, highly trained, highly skilled people. And what I do is follow things that are going on like this and gather information and make recommendations based on what I see happening, based on what I know, what all of this means for our members. And when it's bad, I'll tell them it's bad, and we have no reason to lie to them about this. Because we represent, we endorse Republican candidates all the time. We endorse Democratic candidates. We endorse whoever the best candidate is for our members, and they know that. So it's not as though it's a personal thing, but it's just a matter of telling them, like, this is what's happening. It's clear as day, and this is bad for you. But one of the things that we've also found is that the undecided portion of our members, and I think across building trades unions, is very low. You're either voting for Trump or you're voting against Trump. People aren't really waiting to see who Democrats nominate, at least in unions. It's either I'm voting for Trump or I'm voting for whatever Democrat is running against Trump. So if it's a supporter of the president and you say something that's negative, it's a very, very steep uphill battle to change anybody's minds. And I think that really goes for everybody. I mean, I've got Facebook. I see what's going on, and I see people trying to duke it out and change minds. And I think maybe when I was younger, I might have tried to do the same thing. But it's people are just banging their heads against the wall trying to convince each other of things when it's very unlikely to change a lot of minds. So it's an extraordinary challenge. I mean, I work for a union and I do communications, and finding things like explaining to members what was going on in some of these pension attacks. They understood that, and it changed some minds, and it got people motivated. I think we had 13,000 of our members reached out to their United States senators about that over the course of 4 or 5 days over the holidays. So I mean, certain things, it's just a matter of finding what those issues are that are easy to understand. I could explain the special assistant in the Department of Labor, Office of Labor Management Standards. It means something to me. It's pretty deep in the weeds.
Yeah.
So that might not be like the sexiest issue to try to communicate, but
all right,
it piles up and piles up, and there's not a whole lot on the winning side when it comes to the president.
All right, so let me phrase it this way. From a tactical standpoint, if there are no consequences, political consequences, to be paid by Donald Trump for passing legislation or enacting rules that hurt the labor movement, that hurt workers, that take money out of their pockets, that make it easier for them to be fired, that make it easier for employers to raise their health benefits, that make it easier for employers to take away their health benefits, that make it easier for employers to make it harder to unionize. If Donald Trump can win over union support by saying, your union bosses are going to tell you that's what I said, if there are ultimately no consequences for him to promote this anti-union agenda, what can labor unions do to keep him in line?
I think at the end of the day, it's just it comes down to the swing of the pendulum. I would argue there have been very few consequences in any respect, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we all heard what he said on what was the show with Billy Bush,
Access Hollywood.
Yeah, I mean, we all heard that. If you told me, okay, you can take over somebody's mouth for 5 seconds and you get 5 seconds to say whatever you want to torpedo their chances in a campaign, that would be pretty high up on the list. And nothing happened, nothing changed, didn't cost him a thing. But I think that he's becoming, I mean, in the face of this acquittal, I think he's going to become a lot more brazen in what he does.
Oh, yeah.
And the pendulum can only swing so far until you poke the dog too many times. You kick a lion dog once too many times, and it'll stand up and it'll bite you. So at some point, something will happen, something will be messed with there, where the thin layer of BS isn't going to be enough to cover it up, you know? But I mean, it's challenging because, like, for example, the new NAFTA, right? It's a better agreement than NAFTA was. NAFTA came from the Democrats, and that destroyed manufacturing in America. This one that Trump pushed, it's better than NAFTA. I mean, let's just be honest. So, little things like that. I don't know. I mean, if it's going to be a challenge, but I don't see anything slowing down. Judging by the people that are being appointed to some of these jobs, there may be, like Alex Acosta, for example. He was the first person that Trump appointed to run the Department of Labor was Andy Puzder, the guy in charge of Hardee's, who, we could probably thank for some of our skyrocketing healthcare costs for the amount of heart attacks that guy's responsible for. Also some alleged violence toward former wives and girlfriends. So he pulled out of that race, and it was Alex Acosta, who, apparently had, given a sweetheart deal to one late Jeffrey Epstein, who may or may not have killed himself. We don't really know. What do you think? Dennis, you got an opinion?
Heavy emphasis on the not part of that equation.
Yeah, that's like the one thing that Democrats and Republicans can agree on.
Well, actually, I don't know. Some of them are just kind of hoping the whole thing blows over. By the way, just want to urge everybody, check out our Leonard Goodman. And we did a deep dive on Jeffrey Epstein with Leonard Goodman. And, we're going to bring him back a couple weeks because that's a mini obsession of mine. Anyway, didn't mean to cut you off. Go on.
No, but like Alex Acosta was he wasn't punitive toward unions as the head of the DOL, and a lot of the right was like, what are you doing? You're wasting time. You're wasting an opportunity. I mean, give the Republicans credit for that. When you give them power, they go for the jugular.
No, they don't play, man.
Right?
They do not play.
The whole they go low, we go high. That who was it?
Michelle Obama.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It doesn't seem like going high is really a good
going
idea.
high hasn't worked in
Going
about
low seems
40
to
years.
deliver results.
Jimmy Hoffa knew it right back in the 50s, okay?
Well, back before there were camera phones, things were a lot different, I think,
But by the way,
in all walks of life.
in all walks of life, okay. I'm going to really resist going into a Jimmy Hoffa thing.
You should.
I'm going to do a whole show on it. It's fascinating, particularly the relationship.
You should start a book club. You got to come up with a couple of books first. I mean, you got one. You got 1 month down. What's next?
Well, I'm an obsessive reader. This is like true confessions time with Ed Maher. I'm an obsessive reader. I'm up every night till 3 a.m. reading.
Really?
Which is why when people wake me up at 9, like, why aren't you still in bed, man? I'm like, dude, were you up at 3 a.m.
Walking
reading?
the streets all wild-eyed.
Yeah, that's what I do.
What was the best book of 2019?
That I read?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Ben Joravsky. This is an original right here. Put this in the club.
2019?
Yeah.
God. Well, see, I read a lot of fiction. So I would have to say City of Girls, it's a novel by Elizabeth Gilbert. That was my favorite book of 2019. But best book, I think, of this decade.
It's the Hoffa
Goldsmith.
book.
I'm telling you, man. I cannot rake it high enough for if you're a labor junkie, if you're a political junkie, if you're into memoir, if you want to know what happened to Jimmy Hoffa, if you're in the mob, or gets into the mobsters.
It's probably going to be sold out on Amazon when I leave here. That's this glowing endorsement.
Wait.
You're an Amazon influencer.
Yeah, oh my God, the books are flying off the shelves. Well, I hope I have a little more influence with books than I do with political candidates, because most of the candidates I endorse or vote for lose. All right, so I have to ask you this question. You were talking about how Donald Trump is doing relatively better than his Democratic opponents in the survey of your members. Is there anything that came out of the poll that leads you to recommend, like a certain theme or program or proposal that some of the Democratic candidates could articulate that would build their support with your members?
I mean, I think investing in infrastructure is something that a lot of candidates do, and nobody really, no president. I mean, Obama did a little bit on investment in infrastructure. Trump has talked a lot about it, but I mean, the term Infrastructure Week, National Infrastructure Week, is just a punchline in D.C. now because it's Infrastructure Week, and they talk about all the things that are going to get done, and absolutely nothing gets done. But I mean, like I said before, and like has been said for decades in American politics, it's the economy, stupid. Keep people working, and they will be happy. If their retirement accounts are going up and they're able to continue working, that's the primary issue for most Americans. I mean, without that, without this sort of the security there, you're not really going to be focusing on a whole lot of other issues. You're going to be worried about how to keep the bills paid. So I think providing good paying jobs, whether it's union stuff or not, I mean, trying to put Americans to work, trying to increase people's wages, trying to give them better health care. I mean, this stuff that was at the State of the Union about, the socialists are coming for regardless of what you think about the idea of national health care or what you think about sort of this abuse of the term socialism. I mean, they're coming for the health care, and they're going to take health care away from 180 million very happy Americans. It's like healthcare. This healthcare system in America is shot. The people who have $10,000 deductibles and $7,500 deductibles, I would argue that they're probably not extremely satisfied customers. I mean, that's like disaster insurance. Mm-hmm. It's a terrible thing. So I would say that we got to get back to the basics. Talk about how we're going to keep people working. Talk about how we're going to, one guy that I love, he's a single issue guy, but it's Andrew Yang. I like him. He's smart. You can tell he's smart, and he's got some interesting ideas about automation, and just the fact that at some point, whether it's 2 years from now, 10 years, 20 years from now, it's going to displace people's jobs. And just like, the turn away from coal did, just like the overseas exodus of manufacturing did. So we're going to have to do something about it. And our experience with those two things is terrible. I mean, we didn't retrain people. We just kept mailing out. We just mailed out checks like, hey, your industry doesn't exist anymore. Here's some money. Don't cause too much trouble. And it doesn't really work. So we got to figure out how we're going to keep people working, how we're going to allow people to earn a good living, take care of their families. I mean, what's more important than that? If you have that, you can start to work on, worry about social issues. But it's like we say to our members, vote your job, lobby your hobby. If you're worried about guns, if you're worried about abortion, whatever, take action, reach out to legislators, whatever you want to do, but vote your job because you can't afford guns if you don't have a job. You know what I mean?
Well, when it's funny when you said this about there's no consequences. I would say, just listening to what you were talking about, Donald Trump has made a very clear calculation that there's certain issues he can't bend on because that would upset key portions of his base. Mm. So clearly he's not worried about the working man having jobs, infrastructure part of his base, but he is very concerned, like, for instance, on abortion. He's not going to back away. No matter what he did in his personal life, back in the roaring 80s, 90s, and so forth, Ed Maher.
I don't know what you're suggesting, Ben, but that's out of line.
It is out of line.
He's a virtuous man.
Yeah, he's a virtuous. He's a real virtuous man. So, but he's not going to bend on that one. All right, my next guest is on deck. We should bring him on. And Ed Maher, thank you so much. Sobering.
Go get that book. We'll go through it next month. How's that sound?
You know what? That's your assignment. Right. I'm saying that right now. I cannot talk enough about this Hoffa book. So, yeah, that's your assignment.
I made a pile last night. No kidding. This is a true story. Of all the books that I've ordered from Amazon over the last 6 months that have just been sitting there unread, and I've got like 8 of them. So
put this at the top.
Oh,
this one.
All right.
This
I'm
one.
gonna do it for you,
this
Ben.
one, I'm
My man,
telling
Ben,
you,
I'll do it
man.
for you.
This book, if you're in the politics, labor, mobsters, and what happened to Jimmy Hoffa, and plus Bobby Kennedy and Richard Nixon, it's got a lot going for it.
I'll call you at 3 a.m. Let you know what I think.
I'll be up.
I believe it.
Ed Maher, thank you so much. We'll be right back after this.
Madam Secretary, you talk a lot about the mothers of your friends, where you went to their houses and you knew that they were going to be kind and generous and supportive of you. So that theme of women being present and how they make a difference, talk a little bit about that and how that, again, animated some of the selections that you made of people in the book.
That's a great question,
Madam
Mayor,
Secretary,
because
you talk a lot about...
I wanted to include women who I could distinctly remember the impact that they had on me. And, obviously historical figures. I never knew Helen Keller or Anne Frank or Maria Tallchief or Amelia Earhart, but as a little girl, they made a big impression on me.
It's Chicagoland's adult entertainment playground. It's the world-famous Admiral Theater, 3940 West Lawrence Avenue. The Admiral is homegrown from Chicago, and it's the most conveniently located club in all of the city. 15 minutes from the O'Hare Airport in downtown Chicago Loop. Voted Chicago's best strip club, the Admiral has showgirls galore and a variety of adult entertainment shows. The world-famous Admiral Theater, open every day from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m., 3940 West Lawrence Avenue. For events, showtime, and other information, visit admiralx.com. Must be 18 years of age or older to enter.
Read the Chicago Reader to get up to speed on what's what in Chicago. Culture, food, arts and entertainment, weekly concert listings, weekly event listings, the environment, travel. I can continue, but you get the point. And for all of you Chicago political junkies, raw weekly columns on real city politics from Maya Dukmasova and our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader, free to the public in newsstands throughout the city and online at chicagoreader.com. Read it now and be a more informed Chicagoan.
We've also heard, and I'm going to now direct this at Vice President Biden, I do not believe you are a racist, but I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. You also worked with them to oppose busing. There was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me. So I will tell you that on this subject, it cannot be an intellectual debate among Democrats. We have to take it seriously. We have to act swiftly. As Attorney General of California, I was very proud to put in place a requirement that all my special agents would wear body cameras and keep those cameras on.
Senator Harris, thank you. Vice
Hey, welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
We call this the Lenny Hour on the Ben Joravsky Show from Indivisible Chicago, and my beloved reader, Lenny. Let's see, who was your guest? Oh, Marie Newman. How can I forget? Lenny always comes with a guest. And we have a guest sitting right here, and I'm looking at him. But before we introduce the guest, Lenny, why don't you give folks some updates on what Indivisible is up to and things they should know about if they want to join the resistance?
Yeah, so Indivisible, my local group, is Indivisible IL9, and we're in Jan Schakowsky's district, who's an amazing progressive Democrat in Illinois and throughout the nation. We have been going to the 3rd district because we have endorsed Marie Newman for Congress, and there is going to be a canvass this weekend. There's a canvass every weekend, but this weekend, if there's any event that you go to or any campus that you go to before the primary, March 17th, go to this one because I will be there. There's going to be press there. It's going to be at Beverly Unitarian Church at 10 244 South Longwood Drive. That's in Chicago, and join the team to rally. We're going to do a canvas launch in Beverly, and we're going to continue talking about why Marie Newman is going to give us a new day in IL3. So do that. If you're afraid of canvassing, if you've never canvassed before, then consider coming out to Bar Louie. That's on Monday, February 10th from 6 to 8 p.m. That's at 47 West Polk Street in Chicago, where Blue Beginnings is going to host a training. Political pros know it. Academic research confirms it. The best way to win elections is the old-fashioned way, walking the streets, knocking on doors, canvassing. But for many of us, it's a stretch. We're shy, we're nervous, we don't want to intrude. So Indivisible Chicago is a training program designed to let you get over it. And we'll tell you how canvassing works and what to expect on your first shift, and remove the mystery of why we should do this from veterans who've been doing this for a while. So please join us. That's on Monday. The other thing I wanted to point out that Indivisible is really active on social media. For instance, we all came out just last night to reject the cover-up, to vote them out. This is a great post from Indivisible in Springfield.
Mm-hmm.
So red of a district they are. They turned out. They had their signs. Trump is guilty. Yeah.
Not according to the Senate.
I mourn for honesty. So thank you for Indivisible Springfield for coming out. Thank you to those who came out to Federal Plaza last night with Indivisible Chicago. Indivisibles in Champaign-Urbana turned out too. And also, you know, as Indivisibles, we are there to rally, to turn out on the streets, to canvass for candidates that we believe will help us with our progressive agenda. But we also want to support those Democrats who are in office, including our senators, Senator Duckworth and Senator Durbin, who in the Daily Herald said, let's open our eyes. And Illinois senators call Trump acquittal a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
So find out their office numbers online. Just Google Senator Durbin and Senator Duckworth. Give them a call and say thank you. Thank you for your voice in Washington, D.C. We appreciate you, and keep going. And that's it.
All right, Letty. Now, I'll just say this. Blue Beginnings, we've had Marge Halbert on the show. Mike Lenahan was at First Tuesday talking about Blue Beginnings. And I say this to everybody out there. I've said this many times, so many people I know, Democrats, are wandering around saying, Trump's going to win. It's all over. I've seen this put out so many times.
Was that Bill Clinton?
No, Clinton would say, I love Hillary. That's
okay.
Bill Clinton. My next guest is like, oh, man, that's good. Whoa. It's Rich Little. That's as good. Anyway, but you know what? Stop crying. Put away the tears. Put away your little wimpy predictions. And if you're worried about it, do something about it. Go knock on some doors.
Go knock on some doors. Yeah. Tell people about early voting, which starts in some counties on Thursday. Yeah. If you're not registered to vote, you can do that online at elections.ilgov. And yeah, we got to get out the vote. We got to do it now. We got to bring our friends, because that's actually how we lose, is when we don't do anything.
You start crying.
And
he's going to win.
The woe is me. I've been getting these texts from the DCC, and I really don't even know who, but the texts that I've been receiving are, this is really bad. We're in big trouble. Paul, we can throw up. It's so, I get it. We all feel that, but those sort of negative messages are not going to motivate people to get out.
Hold on. Why don't we, before I engage this voice, because I have a response to that, let me introduce our guest.
Yeah,
here.
so in addition to my activism stuff, I actually, like Ben said, work at the Chicago Reader, and I also have a small business in Andersonville. So when I went around asking people if they wanted to advertise, I knocked on my neighbors' doors, and my neighbor just down the street is Rattleback Records. And I was really happy, actually, to get this job at the Reader, because it's forced me outside of my small business to talk to my neighbors. So this has been a fantastic way to get to know you, Paul. Thank you for being here. This is Paul Ruffino. He owns a shop that just opened up in Andersonville not too long ago, just down the street from us. and we're really happy to have him here. The reason why I was thinking of Paul is because we just had this amazing issue, which I believe you had
Leor and Philip,
on.
yes. Last Sunday it ran, as I recall. Yep, the 50 greatest albums of the 2010s, and let me have to tell you,
Chicago albums. I love that it was a Chicago focus too.
That is correct. I said corrected, young man. And I have to tell you that my ignorance was astounding. So Leor and Philip very graciously educated me, right, D?
Yeah.
Right. Well, maybe not so graciously. Anyway, they educated me, so now I know a lot about it. But you sell many of these records at your store?
It's always an education. I mean, there were a number of things in there, and I've been working in record stores when I was in college here in Chicago, and also, collecting records and listening to music my whole life, born and raised in Chicago. There was still a lot in that issue, a lot of bands that I'd never heard of. So it was an education for me as well. But we do have those records. And if we don't have them, we'll find them.
All right, you got some classics. We're going to go through those classics because that's more my generation. But before we do that, I just want to a couple things. What you said was very interesting before we introduced you. You were talking about when you get those fundraising letters on the emails on the internet, it kind of turns you off. I get bombarded. Paul, this is one of my favorite things. I get bombarded from all sectors. For some reason, I'm on the Tea Party list. I'm on the Defend Trump list.
Oh, lucky you.
I know, and I get lefty stuff too. And the appeals, the Democratic Committee, I'm on their list. So the appeals are just really interesting. Like at some points, I guess they figure it's time to scare me into action with these dire Trump's winning, do that. Or like the other side, the Tea Party, will try to outrage me into action with something. You won't believe what Oprah said about Melania. I'm like, wow. And then you click on that, And by the way, then you get into like worlds of advertising. They're always trying to sell you something. Oh, we got snake oil for you here before you get to what Oprah said about Melania. So anyway, the point is that they really are trying to manipulate you with different. And I think fear, to a certain degree, it works.
It's proven to work, unfortunately. But I think that we spend so much of our day-to-day life, or I shouldn't say we do, because I try not to, but I think, whether it's the media or the powers that be, like trying to keep us afraid. I think on both sides of the political aisle. I think that has been something that has been in their playbook for a while, and it seems, as you said, to work. So they just keep feeding those flames, and when you're working from a place of fear, you're frozen. You're not able to make, good judgment and good decisions. And I think that's what they're counting on. So I'd like to see it. I'd like to see a little less of that. I'd like to see, I want to know facts. I want to know, reality. I'm fine hearing people's opinions, but this whole fear factor, it's off-putting.
Well, I like to see the action. So, like for instance, when Mike Lanahan was at First Tuesday on Tuesday, right before the show, and he came out and he talked about what people can do, join Blue Beginnings, go knock on doors, go make phone calls, what have you. That's like channeling your energies somewhere positive, and instead of sitting back and just crying or going around gloom and doom. You could actually do something, so at least channel it. Your anxieties, your fears, your angst, put it into action, into motion. All right, now speaking of anxieties, fears, and angst, you're in the record business. That's almost like somebody working for a newspaper. It's got a lot of faith and confidence in something that was really strong once upon a time, and we have hope for the future for it.
Right.
So tell people a little bit of how you got into the record business.
So as I mentioned, I worked here in Chicago at a record store chain called Secondhand Tunes, was used and new records back in the day. I was in college at the time, and it was a great job. I loved working there. And always then you kind of had this idea tucked in the back of my head that it would be really cool to own a little shop like this someday. I'm a music lover. I love collecting music. And but then I naturally went from working in a record store to becoming a teacher. I worked in public education for 20 years, both as a teacher and a school administrator. And then after doing that for that number of years, I decided that as much as I loved what I did, and I love public education, and I think it's so unbelievably important to the health and well-being of our society and our culture, it was time to make a change. And so I decided that I wanted to revisit that idea of opening my own shop, which for a long time didn't seem viable for a number of reasons, because as you mentioned, vinyl was kind of a dying format for a long time, but also because I was working in education for 20 years, so it wasn't viable for me to open a shop. But I decided I'm gonna do it. This seems like a good time. You only live once, why not? And I live in Edgewater. I shop and eat and patronize Andersonville, and Edgewater neighborhoods all the time, socialize with my friends there. And I noticed there wasn't a music store in Andersonville. And I think, growing up, again, here in Chicago, I feel like every neighborhood had a record store. And I think that they should. I think there should be a store that people could come to find, whether it's records or CDs or whatever music format that they're looking for. I think that it's an important part. It's as an important part of a neighborhood in terms of the shops that should be there for diversity.
Right. Let me just take this moment. A lot of our listeners from out of town, and so Andersonville is a community in the north side of Chicago, not far from the Evanston border, but anyway, on the north side of Chicago, on the lakefront of Chicago. A little geographical lesson for our out of town listeners.
Thank you.
All right, so you got it together and you opened up a record store.
November 1st of 2018. We decided to open. Well, no, we opened. I decided in the summer of 2018 that I was really gonna do this. And my husband, who is an attorney, when I first brought the idea to him and said, I really would like to, I think, open a record shop, and he was like, no, that's not a good idea, probably. And so I kind of wrote up a business plan and represented the idea to him, and he knows that he's kind of like he grounds me, but I'm kind of like the ideas person, and so I brought the idea to him again, and I said, I'd really like to open this record shop, and here's this business plan I wrote up. And he looked at me and said, we're opening a record shop, aren't we? And I said, yeah. And so he's been on board helping me with this process, along with a number of friends and family members, and so we decided in the summer of 2018 to do it. By November 1st, we were open.
So you're renting a spot on...
Renting a spot right on Clark Street, 5405 North Clark and Balmoral. And it's a great area, as you mentioned. Andersonville has so much to offer in so many ways. So I'm really happy to be there.
And so when you're running a record store, what are the hours?
So we're here, we're open 11 to 7 Monday through Saturday and 11 to 5 on Sundays. Except on the third Sunday of every month when we do something that we've started up recently, a third Sunday concert series. So we have local musicians come and play from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. And we've also partnered with Half Acre Brewing Company, and they do free beer tastings on those third Sundays from 5 to 7 p.m. So it's just like, a way to showcase other local businesses and local talent.
Well, my old friend Mark Thomas, who ran the Alley for many years.
Oh,
yeah. I don't know if you know Mark, real entrepreneur.
I don't, but I know the Alley.
Yeah, and Mark always would tell me, think globally, shop locally. I don't know if he coined that phrase, but he said it all the time. I'm not going to do my Mark Thomas imitation. I'm just going to say it, the phrase. So is that sort of your worldview?
100%. And I think that Andersonville, again, I feel like this is an advertisement for Andersonville, but I feel like one of the nice things about that neighborhood is that they're very fiercely supportive of, independently owned businesses. And I think that's really important.
All right, now, so let's get into some of these records. These are actual LPs.
These are actual LPs.
Mm-hmm. There's a camera there, so you can just show it to the
We
camera.
have.
I'll do a little Vanna White and walk it over there.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
we have David Fry was a.
Thank you, Lenny.
David Fry was a comedian in the 60s and 70s, and this album, Richard Nixon Superstar. I think
it's classic.
It's classic, right?
Classic album.
And speaks so profoundly to Richard Nixon's cult of personality, right? And and I think we have another president currently in the White House who shares some similar egomaniacal tendencies. But I was looking at some of these records, and I was looking at this one in particular, and then the Watergate Comedy Hour, right? Similar vein, the missing White House tapes, but Democrats weren't immune to being skewered as well. There's the First Family Rides Again, which was initially a send up of like the Kennedys. And so in looking, as I was pulling records to kind of bring and discuss.
Time out.
Yeah,
Hold on.
Yeah.
I guess got to stop for a second here. All right. This is old time show.
Joravsky's mind's blown.
Yeah, no, because, this is my generation. Okay. It's my wheelhouse, Paul. All right. So the Watergate Comedy Hour, so in the weeds. Jack Burns and Avery Schreiber, who I loved back in the day, and anybody old out there, I think they're on YouTube a little. You can still see it, but they were comedians. And are you familiar with them at all?
I'm not.
You just know the record. Okay. So one would go, huh? And they would. I would do this bit with Dennis all the time. He doesn't know what I'm doing because he's young, so he never heard it. So I go, huh? Remember when I do that one, D?
Yeah.
Huh? That's Burns and Schreiber. Anyway, do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't, but
no, the one guy, so the guy will be talking and he'll say, huh? And the other guy will say, huh? And then they'll just kind of, huh?
That's kind of great.
Anyway, it's really weird. And I do this bit all the time to Dennis, but he's like,
boy, even though I get it, still really weird. Now I get it. Still kind of weird.
I have to say, I didn't know that reference at all, but here's what's really funny. Like my husband and I will do this little joke thing with each other where like we'll say something and I'll go, huh? And he'll go, what? And I'll go, huh?
You're channeling your inner.
Who knew?
Burns
I didn't
and
even
Schreiber.
know. This is like there's a
You're giants in a business.
You put it in context for me. You give me historical reference for it.
And I try to find it on YouTube once because I wanted to show Dennis. He didn't believe me. Sometimes he plays these games with me. I'll say, this is how it was. And he'll go, yeah, sure it was, Ben. Well, I'm losing my mind. He's gaslighting me. Anyway, I couldn't find it to send it to him. But this proves it.
There it is.
All right. Oh, man, this is classic. The Watergate Comedy Hour. Nixon, by the way, is as insane as Trump is, I could make an argument. I've done this on the show before, that Nixon was crazier. I'll spare you that argument right now. But Nixon was a drunken insomniac. That's a terrible combination. Do you understand what I'm saying? He's staying up late night drinking.
No, I do. I think that, Trump stays up late apparently too, but and he just gets drunk off of Fox News.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's.
I think Trump gets up early.
Oh yeah, he's
the early guy.
Right, but I do think I think he's just up all whenever.
Well, let me ask you this, since
and Fox News is his juice, as opposed to
right, it gets him going.
Yeah.
I guess that's to Trump what a bourbon was to Nixon. So what else do you have there?
On a local tip, right? Mayor Daley on the record.
Oh my!
I mean, can you believe they released records like that?
Ladies and gentlemen, run, don't walk to get this thing. Mayor Daley on. Here's some picture with a fedora. It's looking awfully sharp.
Yeah, it looks sharp there.
All right, youngsters, this is the original Mayor Daley. All right. A lot of you youngsters know Richard M. Daley. Before there was a Richard M. Daley,
this is the
there was
J.
a Richard J. Daley. And it was Richard J. Daley. I'll give you a little reader fact-checking thing here, Lenny. Many years ago, there were rigorous fact-checkers at the Reader, and it was Richard J. Daley. And so everybody who ever remotely lived in Chicago knew him as Richard J. Daley. But they got this one fact-checker at the Reader who apparently just dropped in to Chicago. So I mentioned Richard J. Daley in a story, and she goes, are you sure that it's Richard J. Daley? I'm like, oh, brother. It's like you not knowing Milhouse and Richard Nixon. Anyway. So what is this? This is just
his, some speech, like the speeches or,
WMAQ political reporter Bill Cameron has taken years of painstaking, it should be painstaking, news gathering to put together this superb tribute to the late Mayor Daley. Oh, my God. They put together bits and pieces of Mayor Daley
as a tribute.
So how is this
He was the
new?
boss,
I mean, this album.
Well, no, that's vintage. I mean, that's a used record from back in the day. All of these records that you're looking at right now. So I should clarify, at Rattleback Records, we sell used and new records. They're pressing new issues of records and reissues of records all the time. But these are records that have been around. Whatever the date is on the back of that record, that's how long that record's been floating around.
So this is not a new pressing.
No, I don't.
Damn, someone. I mean, this is like a car that was only driven by nuns on Sunday.
I know.
I mean, this.
It's fun, right?
Yeah. This.
Where did that come from?
This.
I didn't know we were going to get into religion.
Yeah,
Cars
Nothing
nuns
about that.
Sunday.
You know what? Like they always say that this car was only driven by nuns on Sunday. You know.
I'd buy that car. I'd buy that car.
Yeah. So I don't know what year this came out, but this is
Shortly after his death, whenever he died, you know. So.
Oh.
Does it say that? Here on the back? It might have.
Oh yeah, duh.
What does it
Until
say?
his death on December 20th, 1970. I remember.
So
where
yeah.
it was.
So there you go.
So Mayor Daley. So how much are you selling this baby for?
A whopping $4.99.
Do you negotiate?
No.
Okay, that's it. All sales were final.
I mean, come on, look at that record. Where are you going to find that? You
No.
know, it's a piece of history, and it's, even if you just wanted to frame the cover, it's a piece of art.
I know it is so classic.
Right?
I wish we could play it, but we obviously don't have a record player.
No turntable. We'll hook you up.
Yeah. Well. So what else you got?
One of the things I wanted to talk about those records that we brought before. We have the National Lampoon, of course, they've been around forever. The Missing White House tapes. As I was pulling these records, one of the things that I thought about, and I'm just curious about your thoughts on this, is, it's interesting that there's these send-ups of Richard Nixon, these send-ups of the Kennedy family. I don't know in our current political climate if a record like that could get made. I mean, it was clearly they're skewering Richard Nixon, and it's tongue in cheek, and I think probably there were a number of people who voted for Richard Nixon who owned that record, and and got a kick out of it and thought it was funny and understood the humor behind it. I think that's also something besides the fear factor that we talked about. I think we're also lacking a sense of humor and humility, like just in general about life. Yes, there are a lot of serious issues and there are a lot of serious things, but sometimes you just have to it's so absurd.
Yeah, you
just have to recognize the absurdity and laugh at it and poke fun at it. I just wonder if something like that could get made today.
Well, I mean, we do have. It seems like every late night talk show host has an invitation to Trump. So along the lines,
right?
Of
this is that right? That's how
David
I guess that's how we're getting it now, right? Yeah.
And Dennis has a Trump invitation.
Let's hear it.
Hello.
That's all you got to say. That's it.
It's unbelievable.
There's that soft-spoken Trump, and there's yelling Trump, which sounds like Ray Romano. Frankly.
Yeah. Do you know who Ray Romano is?
I do.
Okay.
Come on. Everybody knows Ray Romano.
Lenny, do you know who Ray Romano is? Okay. And not everybody knows Ray Romano.
Everybody loves him. Yeah. They better know him.
I have not spoken publicly.
That's good. That's good.
Oh, man, he'd be at Zany's next week. All right, I just want to say National Lampoon Missing White House tapes. So, of course, this is so 70s when Richard Nixon was being investigated, and eventually there was impeachment articles drafted against him. It was revealed, this is for youngsters out there, that he had been taping all conversations in the White House. So there were it also was revealed that there was 18 minutes missing in the taping. And it was probably the 18 minutes when Nixon said, "I did it." All right. So then the issue became what happened to the missing White House tapes. And his secretary, Rosemary Woods, took the fall. She claimed that she accidentally deleted a portion of the tapes while she was transcribing them. So the joke in the National Lampoon cover here is that this letter is being addressed to Miss Rosemary Woods. This joke has carried on. Paul, I don't know if you watched the Super Bowl, but there was a Super Bowl commercial for who's just the one, Lenny, that does Alexa?
Oh, Amazon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so it was an ad for Amazon, like they need any more advertising. And the gag was the different Alexas down through the years. And so one Alexa, I'm not making this up, they had a Richard Nixon imitator saying, "Alexa, erase that tape."
No way.
Yeah. And then I'm like looking at that going, who gets that other than me? You know what I'm saying?
I get it. That's you people that study history. I mean, I was a history major in school, so I didn't see that ad. I have to go back and look at that now. But that's pretty. I mean, it's obscure reference now for a lot of people, but relevant.
So here you go. Yeah, this is.
He got a lot of flack for not erasing those tapes. I mean, that was a big deal, right? Like, it was like, why didn't he just destroy the tapes?
Well, that was the advice that Pat Buchanan gave him as one of his speechwriters. That was the advice, the general advice that like Donald Trump took away from it. The lesson that Donald Trump learned from Watergate is that Nixon should have burned the tapes.
Yeah.
Okay. Not that he
should not that he should right. Not that he shouldn't have done what he did. You just have to. I mean,
you destroy the evidence.
Look, as I mentioned, I was a school administrator. I was a principal at an elementary school for a number of years, and I can't tell you how often I hear politicians, Donald Trump and others, say and do things that would have first through fifth graders sent to my office to have a talking to with the principal. And these are grown adults with a lot of power.
Okay.
It's bizarre.
All right, so let me ask you the tough question of the day. As a former elementary school principal, would you have sent Nancy Pelosi to the office for ripping up a copy of a speech that you delivered?
No. No, I wouldn't. Not in that context. She ripped up a speech that was filled with, lies and misleading falsehoods and alternative facts. No, I think that was a really brave act of civil disobedience. I read somewhere that she made a mistake. Speaking of late night hosts, right? One of them said her mistake wasn't that she shouldn't have ripped up the paper. She should have rolled it up and spanked him with it.
Who said that?
I think it was Kimmel.
Oh,
yeah.
I give him credit, man. And that's pretty funny. I saw the articles, but put it in my mind when I was doing a search about Nancy Pelosi to get what the reaction was. One article after another chastising her for it. I'm like, man, what a bunch of wimps the mainstream media is.
I know.
I'm just like, God dang, you got this bully president who's just always mocking and maligning you and saying fake news and trying to drive you out of business. And here's this one woman with the guts to stand up to him. And what do? Go, oh, you went too far.
Yeah, he is the president.
Yeah. I'm like, come on, man.
If you don't stand up, if you don't speak truth to power, then what's the point?
Yeah, you know what they'll do? They'll walk all over you. What else you got?
This
there?
is so the kind of a more somber one, but I thought it's called That Day with God, November 24th, 1963, inspirational expressions following the death of President John F. Kennedy. And look at all these people that are on there: Pope John Paul VI. And
wow,
yeah.
Now, where did you find this?
Again, I am a record junkie. Vinyl junkie. I go to garage sales, estate sales, thrift stores. But now that we have a little shop, people, we buy and sell used records and new records, and so people will bring collections of their records in, and you never know what you're going to find.
Did you put the plastic on this?
No, is it still sealed?
I think so.
Yeah, it was never opened. That happens too. So we call that new old stock. So that's somehow that record's been floating around since 1964.
63.
63.
Yeah.
And somehow it made its way over those years unopened and wound up in my little shop somehow. Kind of crazy, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at these names. Yeah, this was 2 days after Kennedy was shot. They came out with this album, really, hate to say it, capitalizing. And
RCA, right? They weren't going to miss a beat.
Was it RCA?
Yeah, like
you're right, RCA. Man, and it's still. So how much would you sell this one for?
Probably $2,000 to $3,000. No, I'm kidding. I think that's like a $3 or $4 record as well.
Okay.
And then your friend Rich Little, you referenced him earlier.
Yes.
Here he is, the first Family Rides Again. This is a send up of. There was a whole series of these first family records, right? The first one was a send up of the Kennedys, as I mentioned. And now this was later. This was from the early 80s, and you can see who Rich Little is sort of supposed to be there. Ronald Reagan, Ron and Nancy, right?
Oh, okay. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And then Ron Jr. in the ballet tutu, and,
of course. every
funny
stereotype
stuff.
you could think of,
Yeah,
right?
and then the bedtime for Bonzo reference.
That's what parody's all about.
Yeah,
though.
and so yeah, this is pretty some vintage stuff from the Reagan years.
The Reagan years.
And how much would this go for?
About $4 or $5. Yeah.
All right.
I mean, we have very reasonable prices. We have some very collectible records. We do, records are a hot commodity now, and so I would say the average price of our used stuff is like in between $5 and $10, and then if you're looking for something more collectible, it could go up to quite a bit more than that.
All right, very good, Paul Ruffino. Thanks so much for stopping in.
Of course.
And Lenny, keep up the good work at Indivisible. Also want to thank Ed Maher, was here earlier in the show, and Miles Kampf-Lassin. Good God, D. A lot of political talk here today. And also, I have to thank the man, the myth, the legend, the pride and joy of Alton, Illinois. And as Paul can tell you, back home in Alton, they call him White Lightning. Give yourself a raise, take it out of petty cash. See you tomorrow, everybody.
Hey, and remember, you can download previous Ben Joravsky shows and Benny J bonus interviews at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites and wherever else you download your favorite podcasts. Downloaders, we live stream this program. It's true. Tuesdays through Fridays, 1 until 3 p.m. Central Time at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites and the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel. Join us on YouTube, and you can join the Ben Joravsky Show live stream chat. An excellent chat as always, live stream chatters. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you all tomorrow.
Big problems become big problems when you let small problems sit.